Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto Sage of 6 Paths Mode Chunin exams. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by X009 and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Naruto looked up from his place on the ground in disbelief at the sight before him. Sasuke, his teammate and rival for whom he shared a mutual hatred, was riddled with senbon needles. They covered his arms, legs, and torso, and 5 were lodged in his neck. The Uchiha coughed up blood as the life-giving fluid flowed from all his wounds. Sasuke felt his body getting colder, weaker, and both boys were absolutely certain he had no chance of survival. "What's with that look, loser?" Sasuke asked as he turned his head and looked down at the blonde. "Why? You saved me," Naruto said, thought as he ran through all the events of the day in his mind. How he had woken up that day in Wave to find his team missing, how he saved Inari and his mother from those 2 thugs. Then when he arrived at the bridge he had to admit this was stupid in retrospect, announced his presence, and then entered the dome of ice mirrors. Sasuke was fighting the imposter hunter Nin. Maybe, if he had concealed himself or done something different, Sasuke wouldn't be. Sasuke thought of all his interactions with Naruto before then. He was an annoying fool, deserving the title of dead last, and it was irritating that the blonde seemed to think of himself as his rival. But as annoying as he was, he had saved him, likely at the cost of his own life. He didn't know why, it was just instinct. Maybe, he thought to himself, briefly remembering his family. It's because I didn't want to lose someone again. Much as he hated to admit it, Naruto and Sakura were the closest things to friends he had. "I hated you," Sasuke said. "Then why did you save me?" Naruto asked. "I never asked for your help." The blonde yelled, refusing to accept that someone else gave their life for him. "I don't know," Sasuke admitted. "My body just moved on its own, idiot." A moment later, the black-haired boy was unable to stand anymore and fell backwards. Naruto caught him, and Sasuke began to say what he believed would be his last words. "That man, my brother. I told myself I wouldn't die until I killed him," Sasuke told the blonde, shocking him. "Don't let yourself die too." The boy's eyes closed and he became still. Naruto's eyes widened and tears began to flow from his eyes. "He landed a blow on me without flinching and died protecting you," Haku said as he got himself off the ground. To protect a precious person, knowing it was a trap, he was still able to jump in. "He is a shinobi that deserves respect," he said on one knee. "Is this the first time you saw a friend die?" he asked, now standing. "This is the way of the shinobi," he said as he entered a nearby mirror. "Shut up," Naruto said quietly. "Sasuke, I hated you too," and yet Naruto thought as he felt a stinging sensation in his eyes, far more intense than what would normally accompany tears. "I won't forgive you." These were his last thoughts before his mind blanked out. A few moments later, Naruto gently laid the seemingly dead genin on the ground, his eyes hidden by shadows. He stood up and remained stationary, displaying no visible emotion. Haku's eyes narrowed behind his mask. The boy's demeanor had changed entirely. "What's wrong? Have you given up?" Haku asked, hoping Naruto would give up. His eyes widened and his jaw dropped behind his mask when the boy raised his head and glared, revealing his eyes. His once blue eyes had turned entirely purple, marked with concentric rings centered on his pupil like ripples in a pond. What? A Dojutsu? But I've never heard of one with this description, and as far as I know, Konoha only has the Sharingan and Byakugan. The now purple-eyed blonde stared at him, his face emotionless and his eyes deathly cold. Kakashi and Zabuza continued their own battle. Despite his words that he believed in his students, which were largely true, the copy ninja couldn't deny that he was worried. The 2 were fresh out of the academy, and while they both had a lot of raw talent, the imposter hunter ninja had obviously received training for many years from a ninja of the same caliber as him, and he knew little of the boy's bloodline. Even if Sasuke awakened his own bloodline, it would be at its lowest level and at best allow him to follow his opponent's movements. These thoughts in mind, he decided it was time to put his plan into action. He quickly pulled out a scroll, flipped it into the air, ran one of his thumbs across a wound on his chest, and in one fluid motion, unrolled the scroll and ran his bloody thumb across it. "Zabuza, can you hear me? Neither of us has time to waste," Kakashi said as he whipped the scroll around him. "This might not suit your style, but let's end the fun." The Sharingan wielder threw the scroll into the air, caught it and made hand sign. "And finish this now." "HMPH, sounds interesting, show me what you can do, Kakashi," Zabuza said, his voice echoing from every direction in the mist. Meanwhile, in the dome of ice mirrors, the now purple-eyed boy glared at Haku. "You've become cold and focused. You have the look of a true shinobi in your eyes," Haku said. He waited but received no response. "Are you going to try to avenge him?" "I do not wish to harm you anymore." Again, he received no response. He raised his defenses when he saw the boy tense. "Here he comes," Haku thought, his eyes narrowed as the boy charged forward, moving with greater speed than before. Haku leapt from the mirror, moving at speeds invisible to the naked eye and throwing his several needles as he moved forward. He was shocked when the blonde vanished from sight, the needles flying harmlessly through the air where he had been a moment before. Suddenly, his eyes bulged as he found the wind knocked out of him. Naruto, his face still displaying no emotion, punched Haku in the stomach, sending the androgynous teen flying through the air. He landed on in a crouch and promptly jumped out of the way when the blonde appeared above him and attempted to grab him by the head. What is this? Haku thought in shock. He's entirely different from before. Haku placed his arms in a cross formation, Senbon appearing between his fingers and began rapidly throwing a hail of the needles at the blonde. Naruto simply held out his left hand, his palm facing the teen. Haku's eyes widened once more when he saw the needles hit some form of invisible barrier, bouncing off of it and clattering on the ground. A barrier? What kind of jutsu is this? What is this boy? Haku jumped back, making sure not to take his eyes off the blonde as he attempted to reach one of the mirrors. Suddenly, he found himself being pulled on by an irresistible force and propelled through the air towards the blonde, barely able to move. Impossible. The blonde pulled back his right hand, balled it into a fist, and punched Haku in the face as he approached, the force of the impact creating a deep crack in the mask. He was sent flying into the air, cracking one of his mirrors upon collision. Before he could fall to the ground, another invisible wave of power slammed into him, sending him flying through the mirror and the air, before bouncing off the ground and skidding to a stop, the crack in his mask growing larger by the moment. As he began to stand, the dome of ice mirrors shattered, falling to the ground in countless pieces. He looked up to see the blonde, who stood unmoving in the center of the rain of shards. Zabuza, he thought as his mask began to fall apart. The blonde suddenly charged forward to end it. I cannot defeat this boy, I am. As Naruto reached the teen, he reached out to grab him by the face when he stopped, his clawed hand mere inches from the boy's face. Looking at the blonde's eyes, he saw him blink, emotion returning to his expression in the form of surprise. You're the guy from Naruto, said as he snapped out of whatever trance he had entered. Everything that had just happened had been a blur to the boy. The boy noticed how his view of the world had changed. Though he could still recognize the older boy he'd met in the forest, he now saw the world as black with white outlines, and he could see the chakra coursing through his body. Why did you stop? Haku asked. I killed one of your precious friends, why can't you kill me? Naruto looked back at Sasuke's unmoving form, the chakra-filled mist obscuring the boy, before finishing his motion and punching Haku, though his strength had returned to normal, and it merely knocked his back to the ground. Haku coughed up blood as he raised himself up on his arms and began to get up again. What happened to that power? You can't kill me like that, he said as he wiped away the blood on his mouth. To show mercy to those who stand against your master is a betrayal to your life's purpose. What use are you to anyone then? Your life has no meaning. Well, speak for yourself. Naruto said. I am speaking of myself. I am no longer of any use of Zabuza. Haku said. Why would you devote your life to someone like that? Someone who works for scum like Gato has no honor. Naruto shouted, unable to understand why Haku would give his life for someone like Zabuza. There were once others who mattered to me. My father and my mother. Haku began. I was born in the land of water, in a small village heavy with snow. My parents were farmers and very poor, our life was hard but we were happy, but then everything changed. Because of something that happened long before I was even born. What do you mean? What happened? Naruto asked. It is in the blood. Blood? My father killed my mother and almost killed me. Haku said to Naruto's shock. After years of suffering civil wars, the people of my land came to fear and hate anyone who carried a Kekkei Genkai. Kekkei Genkai? Its special powers or jutsu passed on through certain clans, passed down from generation to generation. The clans were exploited for all sorts of battles because of their powers and were much feared. Once the wars were over, it was feared their presence would only bring more war. So after the wars were over, they hid their abilities, knowing that discovery would mean death. If you were to search the memories of that boy or your clan, you would probably find this too. My clan? Naruto asked. Have you noticed a change in your vision? You seem to have a taijutsu, like that boy's. Haku said and Naruto's purple eyes widened, now understanding the change in his sight. Haku then went on to explain how his mother had hidden her bloodline and married a farmer, but because of him they were discovered. His father then killed his mother, before he instinctually defended himself, killing his father and those who were helping him in the process. How he had lost his purpose and that no one wanted his. That Zabuza was the first to acknowledge him. I'm no longer useful as a tool to Zabuza. Naruto, I want you to kill me. Kakashi made hand signs and slammed the scroll he was holding into the ground. Ninja art. Summoning. Earth style. Fang pursuit jutsu. Kakashi called out and the kanji in the scroll took on a life of its own and traveled into the ground. HMPH, whatever you do, it's useless. You can't find me, but I can find you. Zabuza said with his eyes closed. Kakashi, you are completely in my hands. Zabuza said before a rumbling sound caught his attention. Suddenly a dog ripped itself out of the ground and bit at his left foot which he lifted out of the way, but another came up and bit into his right foot. Suddenly, all of Kakashi's remaining ninja hounds erupt from the ground and bit into him, completely immobilizing him. I realized if I couldn't see you, I'd have to smell you. My ninja hounds can follow a scent anywhere. I let you through my guard. I wanted you to cut me so the scent of my blood could lead them to you. Ah, the mist is clearing. Know what I see? Your death. Do you intend to talk me to death? Zabuza growled. In a way, yes. With a single command, my ninja hounds will tear you apart. See where your ambitions got you? After your assassination of the Mizukijin coup failed, you were forced to flee with your remaining followers and became a missing nin. You needed money to strike back and hide from the hunter nin, that's why you're working for Gato. Kakashi said, alright Zabuza, now, I'll show you my own jutsu. Kakashi made 3 hand signs, held up his right hand and grabbed his wrist. Lightning and chakra gathered in his palm. Rikiri. This chakra's so strong it's visible. Zabuza thought in awe of the jutsu. I won't let you kill Tazuna. He is the symbol of courage in this land. This bridge is the hope of this land. Your ambitions will sacrifice countless lives. That isn't the way of the shinobi. Who cares? These useless people and their petty dreams. I have dreams of my own. But to have a dream you need to have a future, and yours is all used up. Haku stood before Naruto, waiting for the boy to deliver the final blow. Go on, kill me, why do you hesitate? Haku said, his voice devoid of emotion. Naruto shook his head in frustration, clenching his fists as he tried to comprehend why Haku wanted this. How can you care about someone who uses you like a tool? Because he gave me a purpose and a reason to live. Naruto, for both of our sakes, do it. There's no other way. No. Haku said with a smile. Reluctantly, Naruto drew a kunai. He paused for a moment, thinking about what he was about to do. I feel like if we had met differently we could have been friends. Naruto said as he closed his eyes before he drew a kunai and charged forward. At that moment, Kakashi charged at Zabuza, intent on ending it. Haku sensed his master was in danger. Naruto had almost reached Haku when he reached up to and caught Naruto's hand. The blonde had seen the move but wasn't fast enough to react. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he struggled to move his hand. Forgive me, Naruto. Haku said before looking to Zabuza and Kakashi's battle. Naruto caught this and followed his gaze, his eyes widened when he saw through the thinning mist Kakashi and Zabuza, his eyes showing him their chakra too. He saw Kakashi charging towards Zabuza holding a massive chakra in his hand, intent on impaling him. I can't die yet. Haku said before disappearing in a body flicker. Naruto's new eyes allowed him to follow Haku's movement somewhat and see the other's chakra in the mist. He saw Haku appear between Kakashi and Zabuza, intent on taking the blow for his master. What Naruto didn't see was Haku throwing Senbon at Kakashi's summon scroll, which lay where he left it. As he ran towards them, something clicked inside Naruto. On instinct, he held out his hand just as Kakashi was about to reach Zabuza and Haku. Stop! Naruto yelled and with that, a wave of pure gravity, not that those there knew what it was, all they could tell was that it was an unstoppable force, was unleashed at the battle. Kakashi, Zabuza and Haku were all knocked off their feet and driven into the bridge hard enough to crack the stone, Kakashi's attack disrupted by the force, and his hounds dispelled as they flew through the air as Haku had pierced the summon scroll with his senbon. Naruto's eyes widened, wondering if he had done that, and if so, how. What the hell? Zabuza asked as he began to get up. He looked up and saw Haku before him, picking himself off of the ground. The masked ninja's eyes widened as he realized the boy almost sacrificed himself for him before he shook himself out of it. Well, look at what we have here. A voice rang out from behind Tazuna and Sakura. The ninja and Tazuna turned to see a diminutive figure in the fading mist. Their eyes widen as the mist clears enough to see that the figure is in fact Gato, and behind him stood a massive horde of thugs, all wielding weapons. I pay for a top-quality ninja, and he gets laid out like this. You're a real disappointment, Zabuza. Zabuza's eyes narrowed as he glared at his employer. What is the meaning of this Gato? And who are these thugs? Well, I just had a change of plans. New plan, you die right here. What? Zabuza asked and Haku's eyes narrowed. You're too expensive, so I decided to take you off the peril. Of course, even these guys cost something, so do me a favor and kill some of them. Think you can handle that, demon ninja of the mist? Look at you look about as demonic as a wet kitten. The thugs behind him began to laugh with cruel smirks on their faces, unaware they were basically about to commit suicide by ninja. Well, Kakashi, it would seem our fight is at an end. Zabuza said. Yeah, I suppose you're right. Kakashi replied in a crouch. He noticed Naruto's eyes but said nothing. At first, he thought they may have been an effect of the Kyuubi's chakra, but he quickly dismissed that thought. He decided it would be best to talk about that later. Naruto. Sakura said as she and Tazuna wisely decided to run to the other side of the pair of jonin, now that Gato and his thugs were over there. "Where's Sasuke?" "Sakura." Naruto began sadly. "He's fine," Haku said, getting their attention. "In order to remove him from the battle, I placed him in a death-like state as I did for Zabuza earlier. He'll wake up in a few minutes." "What?" Naruto asked as all the Leaf Ninja and Tazuna's eyes widened. "Why didn't you tell me? You let me think he was dead. I wanted you to kill me after I lost. Had I told you, you wouldn't have done as I asked." Haku replied. "HMPH, you're still too kind-hearted, Haku. I've told you countless times you should always finish off your opponents, though I suppose that for once it's paid off," Zabuza said. "Enough of this. Take them down," Gato said as Sakura ran to the immobile Sasuke. She held back tears upon seeing Sasuke's condition, remembering Haku's words, but still worrying about the Uchiha. At Gato's command, the thugs charged. What followed was not even worthy of being called a battle. Naruto created 5 shadow clones, much to the thugs' shock. Though that fear was quickly relieved when the clones began to act confused, as if they couldn't get their bearings, and soon, they dispelled, leaving a slightly dazed Naruto. The confidence this spectacle gave them didn't last long as, seconds later, an image of a demon appeared behind Zabuza. Naruto, Kakashi, Zabuza and Haku sped forward to meet them. The thug weren't even skilled enough to compete with Naruto, especially with his eyes enhancing his performance. His eyes not only saw in greater detail, they also easily followed their movements, though they couldn't predict or memorize them like the Sharingan. Still, this allowed him to read their movements, and the thug's skill couldn't compare to that of a ninja, even a fairly poor one like Naruto was now. He knocked out his opponents while the others simply killed them. Haku may have had a problem killing some kids, but not thugs like these. Soon, the remaining mercenaries were abandoning their employer, and Gato was cornered by the famed demon ninja. "Well, wait a minute," the tyrant said fearfully. "What was it you said? I look as demonic as a wet kitten." Zabuza growled as he approached the man. The midget backed away, holding his hands in front of his body in a vain effort to protect himself, his eyes wide with terror. He briefly looked backwards when he felt the back of his foot touch the air and saw it was halfway off the bridge. There was nowhere left to run. Hang on. Let's be reasonable. I underestimated you, you're more than worth your payment, in fact, I'll pay you triple. I'll give you anything you want, just name it, please don't kill me," said Gato as he continued to beg for his life. "No deal, Gato. I should have guessed you'd pull something like this. Look at you, even now, you refuse to die with dignity. Begging for your life like the coward you are." Zabuza sneered as Gato whimpered, cowering in fear from the demon of the mist. "See you in hell." Zabuza swung his sword and cut the midget's head off. What did I die?" Sasuke asked himself before he heard Sakura calling his name. "Wait, Sakura. Am I?" Sasuke's eyes slowly opened and Sakura looked into his eyes, her own widening as she saw him look at her. "Sakura." Tears welled up in Sakura's eyes, even after Haku told them he was just in a death-like state. When she saw him, she had feared he was truly dead. Sakura wrapped her arms around the boy and cried in joy. "Sakura, that hurt," Sasuke said. "So sorry," Sakura said as she got up and compassed herself. "What about Naruto and that masked kid?" Sasuke asked as tried to stand. "Don't move, you're not fully recovered yet. Anyway, don't worry." He switched sides, so did Zabuza. Sakura said, trying to put him at ease. Sasuke turned to her with a quizzical expression. "What?" he asked in confusion. "Apparently, Gato decided they cost too much and hired a bunch of thugs to take us all out," Tazuna said. "Bastard learned the hard way, street thugs don't match up to ninja." Sasuke's brow furrowed as he processed this information. Did Naruto defeat the masked guy? "I don't know, I couldn't see through the mist, and there's a lot I don't know, but there's something up with his eyes. I think he has a taijutsu like your clan's, Sasuke." "What?" "Naruto has." "Hey, guys, look," Sakura called out. "Sasuke's up." Kakashi, Haku, Zabuza and Naruto turned to them. Sasuke was surprised when he saw Naruto's eyes. For some reason, he found them vaguely familiar but couldn't place where he had seen or heard of them before. "Hey guys," a voice called out. They all turned to see Inari standing there with all the villagers. "This is," Tazuna began in shock. Pride welling up inside him at seeing his entire village had been inspired to stand up to Gato. "Sorry, looks like we were a little late," Inari said. "Don't worry about it, it was nothing we couldn't handle," Naruto replied. "What shall we do now, Zabuza?" Haku asked his master. Zabuza crossed his arms, considering his options. He had known it was a mistake to trust Gato, but they'd needed the money. "I suppose we need to find a new employer. The two of you are welcome to stay at our place for a few days," Tazuna said. "After we tried to kill you?" Zabuza raised a non-existent eyebrow. "Well, you seem pretty down on your luck and you did take out Gato," Tazuna replied. "Well, since I'm not really in a condition to go anywhere tonight, I suppose we'll take you up on that. Don't regret this later." "Naruto." Kakashi said, getting his students' attention. They were too far away from their teammates for them to hear what they were saying. What exactly happened in that dome? Naruto explained what had happened during the fight with Haku. So, you just blacked out and when you came to, Haku had already been beaten and had given up. Yeah, everything between when it looked like Sasuke died and Haku's mask breaking was a blur. Naruto said, his brow furrowed as he tried to recall what had happened. I see, Kakashi said. He fought and defeated Haku without being conscious, fighting purely on instinct. Was it the Kyuubi? No, we all would have felt its chakra and its power wouldn't have simply receded like this. The only other explanation would be that he was overcome by the genetic memory of this bloodline he's unlocked. But, I've never heard of such a thing happening before, or at least not in the Uchiha or Hyuga clans. And where did it come from? Neither Sensei nor Kushina had a Dojutsu or a bloodline for that matter, unless you count the Uzumaki's longevity. Do you know what they are, Kakashi-sensei? What do they look like, anyway? They're purple with 4 rings centered on your pupil. And no, I don't recognize this Dojutsu. Seriously? That sounds pretty freaky, though I guess it's cooler than those Sharingan eyes. Naruto grinned. Though it does make everything look kind of weird. I'm seeing everything as black with white outlines, and I think I can see your chakra. Does the Sharingan make everything look like this, sensei? He said, looking around before raising his hand and staring at it. No, though I can see traces of chakra. Naruto, you should know Dojutsu are coveted by the villages. It would be bad if word got out about those eyes. What's to worry about? I'm sure we can handle it. Naruto said confidently. Yes, well, just in case, deactivate those eyes for now. I'd like to keep this under wraps. Naruto looked at the copy ninja curiously. Okay, how do I do that? You should be channeling chakra into your eyes to keep them activated. Really? Doesn't feel like I'm using any chakra. Try to cut the flow of chakra to your eyes anyway, just humor me. Naruto closed his eyes and tried to do as he was told. He closed his eyes and focused on cutting the flow of chakra to his eyes. When he opened them, he saw his vision was back to normal. He looked at his hands, seeing them in normal color and without chakra once more before speaking. Alright, back to normal. The blonde said with a grin. Kakashi deadpanned at him. Actually, they still look the same. What? Really? But everything looks normal again. Naruto asked in shock. Kakashi sighed. With a sigh, the Sharingan wielder stated. I get the feeling that's the best we're going to get. He then turned and began walking towards the others, gesturing for the blonde to follow. Come on, we'll have to figure out something later. After the celebrations were over, the shinobi all stayed at Izuna's house. Zabuza was standing outside the building, looking up at the sky deep in thought. This wasn't the first time they had been double-crossed by an employer, though they did build a reputation of killing everyone who did so. That didn't stop some arrogant power-hungry fools like Gato from thinking they could pull it off. Truth was, his ambitions had long since become impossible, and he knew it. Hey, you. He turned to see the now purple-eyed blonde walking out of the house, giving him a hard look, though it was hard to tell with the sunglasses he was wearing. After trying to turn off the Dojutsu for a while longer, Kakashi eventually gave up and decided that either Naruto had too much chakra and not enough control, or they were like the Byakugan, and their presence would be obvious even when inactive. After this, Kakashi got him the sunglasses to hide his new eyes. Huh? What do you want, kid? Do you care about Haku at all? Naruto asked angrily. HMPH, is that what's been bothering you all day? Kid, you're naive, that's how the ninja world works. Haku's nothing but a tool to me. You say that even after he was ready to give his life for you? Naruto almost yelled. After he lost, he asked me to kill him all because he thought his loss meant he was of no further use to you. He respects and cares about you that much, and you don't care at all. I can't stand the thought that someone as kind and loyal as Haku would give his life for someone who wouldn't care about it. Kid stopped talking. Naruto glared until he noticed the look in his eyes. We shinobi are still human. It's not easy to become an emotionless tool. It may be impossible. The masked nin said. Go back inside, I'm done talking. The next morning, it was the day they would set out. They were all eating breakfast at a table, except for Zabuza, who was leaning against a wall with his arms crossed. Sasuke seemed to occasionally glare at Naruto, but hadn't said anything. The Uchiha was intrigued by Naruto's Dojutsu, but was also slightly upset about the outcome of the fight. He could still hardly believe that Naruto, the class clown, had managed to defeat an opponent that he couldn't, even if it was due to the blonde's bloodline. Naruto noticed Sasuke's glare and seemed annoyed but also didn't comment. Sakura was alternating between acting normal and swooning over Sasuke as usual, while Zabuza and Haku stayed silent. Hey Zabuza. Naruto spoke up. What is it? The missing ninja asked, glancing at the blonde. Would you betray your village anyway? Were you really just that greedy, or was it something else? If you must know, I was trying to save my country. Zabuza said with a glare. He decided to indulge the brat due to the epiphany he helped him to the other night, but he really didn't like talking about this subject. You tried to save your village by taking it over. That seems like twisted logic, Zabuza. Kakashi replied, not believing it. Have you ever heard of the bloodline purges, Kakashi? This caused his eye to widen in realization, while Sasuke's and Sakura's widened in shock. Naruto had heard of this already from Haku. Wait, bloodline purges? What's he talking about, Kakashi-sensei? Sakura asked. Kakashi paused a moment before answering. Kiri has a long history of civil wars because of the power they possess. Those who hold Kekkei Genkai like Haku's ice techniques, the Sharingan or Naruto's Taijutsu, were used as living weapons to a far greater degree than other ninja to destroy their enemies and inspire fear. The previous Mizukage and many of the people of the Land of Water came to see them as demons that brought war and suffering to them. After the wars were over, in an effort to prevent further tragedies, they slaughtered all those known to hold bloodlines. Kakashi explained, and all eyes, aside of course from those who already knew of this, widened in shock. My father murdered my mother and tried to kill me because he discovered we held a Kekkei Genkai. Haku said, shocking them further, especially Sasuke. He had always been told being an Uchiha, having the Sharingan in his blood, made him special. To hear now that it would have demonized him in another country was an almost terrifying thought to the young Uchiha. I'm sorry to hear that. Kakashi said. It is fine, you had nothing to do with it. That's awful. Does that kind of thing happen often in the ninja world? Tsunami asked. No, but assassinations and kidnappings of those who hold Kekkei Genkai are common. They're powerful assets and dangerous enemies. Kakashi said. I trust you'll keep quiet about Naruto's Taijutsu. The civilians nodded. I wanted to stop the fourth Mizukage's madness anyway, that doesn't matter now. There was a rebellion and they won. There's a new Mizukage and I hear whoever it is even has a Kekkei Genkai themselves. Zabuza said. Of course, I can't go back now. We were working with Gato to get the money to survive, not to try to take over the village again. Why don't you join another village? Kakashi asked. What village would take in someone who tried to kill their Kage? I could put in a good word for you with the old man. Naruto said. Old man? Haku asked. He has a kind of bond with the Hokage, kind of like a grandson to him from what I've seen, Kakashi said. Are you kidding me? This kid? Zabuza asked skeptically. I'm serious. He's also wise and tries to avoid bloodshed whenever possible. Also, Konoha's feelings on Kekkei Genkai are pretty much opposite Kiri's, Kakashi replied. Haku, what do you think? Zabuza said. I'd like to believe it, but fine, at this point, we don't really have much to lose. Zabuza finally said. Kakashi sighed. I know I'm going to hear about this later. Izuna and his family, along with a single worker, stood across from the party of ninja on the bridge linking the country to the mainland. The bridge, which had been the only hope of their nation, had, after so long, finally been completed, and it was time for the Leaf Shinobi and the two missing nin to say their goodbyes to the recovering nation. I'd like to apologize again for aiding Gato. Haku said, bowing his head slightly. No problem, that's all water under the bridge. Thanks to all of you, in the end we completed the bridge and our land is free from that tyrant's clutches. But, it's sad to see you guys go. Tazuna said, resting his hand on Inari's head. Thanks for everything. Don't worry, we'll be sure to visit. Naruto grinned. You better, Inari said, shaking with the effort of holding back his tears. Naruto's smile fell as he too struggled to hold back tears before his expression returned to a grin, though he continued shaking. You sad, Inari. It's okay to cry, you know. I'm not going to cry. Inari yelled. But you can cry if you want to. Fine, later. Naruto replied, turning his back on Inari. Looking back at Naruto, one could see that, like Inari, he now had tears streaming from his eyes. Sakura looked at Naruto with a slightly annoyed expression. Geez, they're like twins. This kid's got a long way to go before he becomes a true shinobi, Zabuza thought. That boy, he changed Inari's heart. And Inari changed the people's hearts. That boy brought courage back to this nation. The bridge builder said as he watched the ninjas' retreating figures. Oh, yeah. We need to name this bridge, don't we? The worker asked. Well, I have a perfect name for it. Oh? What is it? Tsunami asked her father. How about the Great Naruto Bridge? Tazuna replied. The smiles from the others told him they agreed. At night, Team 7, Zabuza and Haku rested at a small camp, sitting around a campfire. What's Konoha like? Haku asked, glancing around the campfire. You said they see Kekkei Genkai as valuable. That's right, the philosophy is that every true Konoha shinobi must love, believe, cherish and fight for the village's sake, as many previous generations had done before them. Bloodlines are seen as a valuable tool for the shinobi possessing them that allow them to better protect the village, and as such are seen in a more positive light than in Kiri, where it's believed they exist solely to wage wars. Kakashi explained. I see. I must admit, I'm looking forward to seeing this. Haku said. I still find it hard to believe that your Hokage will give us a chance just like that. Zabuza spoke. Don't worry about it. You'll see, the old man's sure to help you guys. Naruto assured them confidently. Naruto. Sasuke's voice was heard the first time since they left Wave. It surprised Team 7 even more since Sasuke rarely spoke to the blonde, out of all people. What do you want, Sasuke? Naruto turned to his teammate. Sasuke seemed to be more condescending to him than usual. Naruto was unaware of the reason behind it. Sasuke believed Naruto was becoming stronger than him, part of him found it unacceptable, while the other side refused to acknowledge the possibility. How did you beat Haku? Sasuke asked. Naruto stared into the campfire, trying once again to recall the events of the battle in vain. After a moment, the blonde replied. I don't know. Sasuke's eyes narrowed and Sakura's raised an eyebrow at the blonde. What do you mean? How can you not remember winning the fight? Just that after it looked like Sasuke died, I blacked out. I guess that was the same time my bloodline activated when I came to, I was about to kill Haku. Everything between that time was a blur. I believe he instinctually called upon the genetic memory of his Dojutsu. It overwhelmed him and he fought purely on that instinct. Kakashi explained his theory. I never heard of something like that happening with a Dojutsu before. Zabuza commented as he turned to the copy ninja. Neither have I, Kakashi agreed. But it's the only explanation I can think of. What did it do to him? Sasuke asked the older boy, wanting to learn more about Naruto's power. Haku's eyes narrowed, not wanting to think back to his near death. A few moments after I put you into a false death, he stood up, already overwhelmed by his bloodline. He was suddenly able to keep up with me, most likely by channeling chakra into his legs, though I don't think that alone could account for the difference in speed. I think his eyes allowed him to follow my every move and he had access to jutsu I'd never seen before. What jutsu? Sasuke inquired. I saw 2, possibly 3. The first he used to create a barrier of some sort. My needles were useless. The second allowed him to pull me in. I tried to reach one of my mirrors when I suddenly found myself pulled through the air towards him. I was powerless to defend myself at that time. The third, though I believe it may have been a variation of the barrier, sent out a wave of force strong enough to shatter one of my mirrors. I believe it was the same technique you used to save us. Haku explained, turning to Naruto at the last part. Sasuke's hands clenched. This Dojutsu of Naruto's may even be as strong as the Mangekyo. Do you know how you did that, Naruto? Kakashi asked. Naruto looked down at his hand, remembering the power he felt and shook his head. No. Well, I must admit, I'm curious about this bloodline of yours. Kakashi mused. Perhaps Lord Hokage will know more about it. At their position guarding the gate of Konoha, Kitetsu sighed as he looked out to the empty road. It was another lazy day for the 2 Chunin who usually guarded the gates. Though Izumo was perfectly content with this, Kitetsu was a little irritated at the monotony of guarding a gate day in and day out and was considering suggesting they take a mission for a change. Looks like another boring day on guard duty. Kitetsu said. You shouldn't complain about it. The pay's good and there's no real risk. Besides, would you rather we be under attack or something? Izumo replied. I guess you're right. Still, I wish something interesting would happen for a change. Minutes later, Team 7 along with Zabuza and Haku approached Konoha. As the group was walking towards the gate, the guards at first moved to greet them, but stopped when they saw Zabuza and instead stared in stunned silence of the infamous demon ninja of the mist. Hey, guys, what's up with you? Naruto looked at them with raised brows. These were 2 people he knew fairly that didn't see him as a demon. You guys know who that is behind you, right? Kitetsu asked, slightly on guard. Yeah, he wants to join the village. Naruto replied. Both looked down at the blonde in shock before Izumo voiced their thoughts. Are you serious? HMPH, nice to see my reputation precedes me, but do you think I could fool someone like Kakashi that easily? Zabuza said. Believe it or not, he's being sincere. If the Hokage is willing, he and his protege here will be joining our village. Kakashi said. Now, if you'll excuse us, we really should give our mission report. As you can see, we have a lot to talk about. And I'm going to be scolded for not coming back or asking for reinforcements when the mission was upgraded to an air rankin for bringing Zabuza here, knowing how Kiri will take it and probably for teaching them so little to joy. With that, the group headed off towards the Hokage tower. The guards were so stunned they didn't even question Naruto's sunglasses. Well, you got what you asked for. Izumo said, still a little shocked. Kitetsu blinked before looking to the sky. Yeah, I think it'll work if I ask for a bonus. Izumo shook his head. Not a chance. Kitetsu sighed before propping his arm on the table and resting his head on his hand. That's what I thought. Here is in Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage, known as the Professor and the God of Shinobi, the only one to hold that title since the Sage of the 6 Paths, for his prowess and mastery of the ninja arts, sat at his desk facing a never-ending battle against the most persistent enemy of all Kage paperwork. While it wasn't as bad as most believed, it still took up a lot of their time. Lord Hokage. His assistant, a kunoichi in her early 20s with black hair stepped into the room, seeming slightly nervous. Hiruzen raised a brow as he noticed how tense she was. "Yes, what seems to be the matter? Team 7 has returned," she replied. His expression didn't change, since that didn't answer his question. That wouldn't be enough to make her nervous. "And Zabuza Mamachi's with them. It seems he wishes to join Konoha." The old man's eyes widened at this. How could they have encountered someone like that on a C-rank mission? And why would Kakashi believe he would be a loyal Konoha ninja? "I see, send them in," he ordered as he sat back in his chair, hands clasped on his desk. She gave the group the okay to enter and left the room after they did. "That's the god of shinobi. He looks like he should be in a retirement home," Zabuza thought. Then again, that says nothing about his skill. Haku doesn't exactly look menacing either. "Hey, old man," Naruto said, grinning as he saw his grandfather figure. "Welcome back, Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke, and you as well, Kakashi," the old man said with a smile which fell into a more serious expression as his gaze turned to the missing nin. "I must admit, I was a bit surprised to hear you wish to join our village." "Yeah, make that two of us. Part of me can't believe I'm actually here," Zabuza replied. "I'd imagine so. Kiri and Konoha are very different, as you may find out soon enough, depending on the outcome of this meeting. Kakashi, have to ask how you came across the demon of the mist and this boy, who I assume is with him." "Yes, well, it seems Tazuna lied to us about the scope of the mission. It was more like an air rank," Kakashi explained. Hiruzen's eyes hardened when he heard that. There was a tense pause before the professor spoke up. "I'm sorry, I must have misheard you. I thought you said this mission was upgraded to an air rank." "Haha, I'm afraid you heard right." Kakashi gave a nervous eye smile. "I'm going to have to ask you to elaborate," the Hokage said. A while later, Hiruzen sighed at having heard the full scope of the mission and why Kakashi decided to give Zabuza a chance. He should have known something like this would happen. Things with Naruto always seemed to become complicated. How did all of this come from a simple C-rank mission? Hiruzen sighed again. "Although I have to disagree with your course of action, what's done is done now." "Huh?" Naruto started, surprised. He had thought that the old man would be proud of them. But they couldn't afford anything else. "You can't be saying we should have just left them to deal with it." "Of course not. Had we known about the state of their country, we could have worked out some way for them to compensate us in the future. Perhaps an IOU to be paid when the country was back on its feet or a trade agreement rather than risking the lives of 3 newly graduated genin. At the very least, we could have sent backup." "Wait, these 3 are fresh out of the academy." Zabuza gestured toward the genin, obviously surprised. "Kakashi, what did you teach them?" He'd been impressed that Sasuke was able to hold his own against Haku, even forcing him to use his trump card, and that Naruto had actually managed to pull one over on him. To hear they were fresh out of the academy was startling. "Here we go, well, tree climbing and some teamwork exercises, is that all?" Zabuza asked incredulously, and Kakashi I smiled and chuckled sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head. Both Zabuza and the third stared at the man. "Kakashi, that's all you taught them, and you brought them on a mission of A-rank difficulty?" the third asked. "Well, actually, I taught them tree climbing and wave." "You've gotta be kidding me." Zabuza shook his head and face palmed while Hiruzen glared at the silver-haired jonin. "Kakashi, we will have to talk about your teaching methods," the Hokage said before turning to the former Miss Ninja. "In the meantime, tell me why I should consider your request, considering your previous actions." Apparently, Zabuza staged his coup in an attempt to halt the 4th Mizukage's bloodline purge. Kakashi said, and Hiruzen raised a brow. "Ah, yes, it's true, those sordid affairs did occur around the time of your betrayal," Hiruzen mused, stroking his beard in thought. "I take it the purges were as bad as our information would suggest." Zabuza scoffed. "Probably worse. Yugura managed to convince everyone that bloodline holders may as well have been true demons in human form. If a bloodline holder was found, they would be ruthlessly slaughtered, whether they were ninja or untrained civilian carriers. You could kill an infant if he bore a bloodline and get 15 minutes of fame. I've seen that happen, firsthand." The 3 genin looked in horror at that, while Hiruzen and Kakashi's eyes narrowed and Haku cringed, going back to the day his mother was murdered. Not only was it an atrocity, it was tearing our country apart. Those who could see the truth began to rebel against the 4th Mizukage's regime. I just happened to be at the forefront. Haku stepped forward. "As you have been told, I bear the ice element Kekkei Genkai and am quite possibly the last of the Yuki clan. My mother hid herself as a civilian and married my father, a simple farmer. We were happy until I discovered my bloodline and my father discovered us. He led the people of my village to murder me and my mother. I watched him kill her and then try to kill me. I survived only because my bloodline activated subconsciously and killed everyone left in the house. We lived on the outskirts of the village. I escaped before the rest of the villagers knew what happened and wandered the country until Zabuza found me and took me in. Do you have any idea what led the Mizukage to act in such a manner? My encounters with Yugura beforehand led me to believe he was a kind and just man." Hiruzen said. Zabuza's eyes narrowed as he thought back to those days. That was the odd thing. No one does. The change was gradual, but there was something odd. He definitely wasn't the man we once called our Mizukage when the purges began. Some thought he was being controlled, maybe by some powerful genjutsu, but as far as I know there was never any proof. Hiruzen was silent for a few moments, closing his eyes as he considered what he'd heard before opening them and looking at Zabuza. What you've told me matched what I've heard. In light of this information, we will have to discuss those events further at a later date, but I will give you a chance. Zabuza will have a 6-month probationary period and will be unable to take missions outside the village for the span of 1 year. You will be allowed to join the village. Zabuza nodded and Hiruzen turned to Haku. As for you, since you were not an official ninja, but were loyal to one, your probationary period will be half your mentor's, and, if you wish, you will be allowed to restart the Yuki clan here. Thank you Lord Hokage. Haku bowed. We will have to gauge your skills later to see exactly what rank you will receive. Hiruzen said to the androgynous teen who nodded. Were there any other noteworthy events over the course of this mission? Yes, Sasuke activated the Sharingan during the mission, but Naruto also unlocked a Taijutsu I can't identify. Kakashi said and the third blinked. I see, that's a surprise. I assume that's why you're wearing those sunglasses. The Hokage responded and Naruto nodded. Well, let's see it. Naruto removed his sunglasses and opened his eyes, revealing the purple ring Taijutsu to the Hokage. Hiruzen gasped, his eyes wide as he stood up in disbelief at the sight before him. I don't believe it. What is it? You know what they are? Sakura asked. Yes, the Rinnegan. The Hokage replied, surprising everyone present, aside Naruto who had never heard of that. The same eyes as the sage, are you sure, old man? Zabuza asked. I'm sure. Hiruzen nodded as he sat behind his desk again. Naruto looked slightly confused. Wait, what's so special about my eyes? He asked, not understanding why they were such a big deal. And who's the sage? The sage of the 6 paths. He was the first and supposedly most powerful shinobi who ever lived. He created the ninja arts and was a bearer of the same Taijutsu you have. Kakashi answered. But though I assumed the eyes were real, I believe the man was just a myth. I assure you, he was real, but he lived over 2,000 years ago. There is little known of him now. The third said. Naruto the Rinnegan is the greatest of the 3 great Taijutsu. Certainly one of the most powerful bloodlines in existence. A grin grew across Naruto's face and he pumped his fist. Really? I knew I was awesome. Naruto. Hiruzen interrupted. This is no laughing matter. If word of this reaches the other villages or certain individuals, they will stop at nothing to kill or capture you. That stopped Naruto in his tracks, freezing in place with wide eyes. The fact that you possess those eyes is an S-rank secret. Understood. All the ninja present nodded. Lord Hokage, Naruto can't change his eyes back. Sakura said. Is there some reason why he can't or? Unfortunately, from what I know, the Rinnegan is permanently active. Once awakened, there is no way to return the user's eyes to normal. Hiruzen explained. What? You mean my eyes are going to look like this forever? Naruto asked, surprised. I'm afraid so. The old man replied. Lord Hokage, how did you recognize the Rinnegan? Kakashi asked. A student of mine, Jiraiya, trained a Rinnegan user in AIM years ago. He told me about it. That aside, I'm not called the professor for nothing. I know of many legends, and though there are various different accounts on its abilities, its description is constant in all the legends. The third replied and Naruto looked excited. Wait, if these bloodlines travel through families, then we must be related. Can you contact him for me? Or Naruto said, excited about the possibility of meeting family for the first time, only to be cut off when the Hokage shook his head. I'm sorry Naruto, I was told he died many years ago, before I even knew of him. Hiruzen said sadly. Fearful that certain elements in Konoha would find out, such as Danzo, Jiraiya had kept knowledge of his Rinnegan-bearing student to himself until he heard of his death. The blonde's mood immediately dropped. Oh, was all he could say. It tore at the old man's heartstrings to see his surrogate grandson's hopes rise so, only to be dashed by reality. I wasn't told much about the Rinnegan's abilities. I'll ask Jiraiya to return to the village to aid you. According to my information, he was planning on returning around the time of the Chunin exams anyway. Chunin exams? Sakura parroted. Exactly what it sounds like, a series of tests meant to see if you're worthy of being promoted to Chunin. I intend to nominate you for them. Kakashi explained. Hiruzen glared at the former Anbu captain. Not if that's all you've taught them so far. From the fact that they survived this mission, I'm sure they've improved on their own since they graduated, but that alone isn't enough to prepare them. Kakashi cringed slightly at that. Well, at least I have 2 months to make up for that, Kakashi said, ignoring Naruto and Sasuke's scowls for almost costing them the chance to progress. Sakura was significantly less upset. So, who's this Jiraiya anyway? Naruto asked. Kakashi turned to the young Jinchuriki. Lord Jiraiya, along with Lady Tsunade and Orochimaru, are known as the three legendary Sannin. They're Lord Hokage's former students. Zabuza shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe you don't even know of renowned shinobi of your own village. Those are three of the strongest ninja alive, but years ago, Orochimaru betrayed your village. The third Hokage sat back in his chair as he thought of his scattered students. Yes, he was my star pupil, but he was always ambitious. His lust for power and immortality eventually consumed him, and he committed unspeakable crimes against the village. It's common knowledge that Jiraiya runs our spy network and is for Tsunade, said, sighing at the end. Though she is not a missing nin and is still loosely affiliated with us, she left the village and currently has no intentions of returning for reasons that are her own. He then looked up. If there's nothing else, I must have words with Kakashi. Zabuza, might I make a request? I want you to aid Kakashi with teaching these three while you're on probation, at least until the exams begin. Hiruzen then turned to Kakashi. It's not that I've lost faith in your teaching abilities, Kakashi, but with Sasuke possessing the Sharingan, your team will be a target to other villages and people like my wayward student. Even more so if and when knowledge of the Rinnegan gets out, and you seem to be a good teacher, considering the skill young Haku has. Rest assured you will be compensated. I understand, Lord Hokage. Kakashi replied. Not like I'll have anything better to do and I do owe them I guess. Zabuza said. Naruto looked excited to learn from another powerful ninja. Sasuke smirked slightly, sure this would help him fulfill his goal, and Sakura paled at the thought of being trained by the demon ninja of the mist. Wait a minute, old man, what do you know about my family? Naruto asked. He had asked the old man before, but he had always told him he couldn't tell him. You always said you couldn't tell me why. Was it because of my bloodline? Their bloodline had nothing to do with it. Suffice it to say no one on either side of your family ever exhibited this taijutsu before. You were never told because your father made many enemies. If word got out you were his son, the same individuals would stop at nothing to kill you for revenge. He said before considering the new developments, specifically Naruto's taijutsu. Though with your other secrets, that wouldn't change much to be honest. Very well. Naruto, I was planning to wait until you were 16, but if you pass the upcoming Chunin exams, I'll tell you everything about them, is that alright? Yeah, I guess that just gives me more reason to pass. You'll see, in 2 months, I'll be the awesome ninja I'm meant to be, and then you'll tell me everything. Hiruzen smiled. Good, now, you are all dismissed. His smile was replaced into a glare worthy of his title as his eyes turned to the copy ninja. Except for you, Kakashi. He then looked to the ex-Mist ninja. Zabuza, Haku, my Anbu will find you and take you to an assigned apartment. Here are your new forehead protectors. Hiruzen said as he handed the Pearleaf Village forehead protectors. Naruto, Sakura, Sasuke. Since your team brought them here, I'll ask that you show them around the village. The three nodded, Sasuke obviously unhappy about the order, and left. Kakashi paled slightly as he was left in the room with the second god of shinobi, who was glaring daggers at him. In the absence of their sensei, Team 7 along with Zabuza and his apprentice stepped out of the administration building, the ex-missing nin now wearing Konoha forehead protectors. Having nowhere to go, Zabuza swept his eyes over the village, unlike when he had been on his way to the Hokage's office, where he had noted defenses and the Anbu following them. He truly took in the sight of the village. Well, this place is a hell of a lot more peaceful than Kiri, that's for sure. Zabuza noted. Sakura turned to the man, who still intimidated her a little. What do you mean? Zabuza shrugged. Even before the fourth Mizukage went batshit on bloodline holders, there was always a tenseness, a sense of threat that Konoha doesn't have. So, let's get started. There's a lot to show you. Naruto said. With that, the three genin showed the two new citizens of Konoha around their new home. Over the course of their tour, Zabuza and Haku, of course, noticed the looks of shock they were getting, but were more surprised at the looks that were directed towards Naruto. Haku was reminded of his time in Kiri, remembering the glares directed at him by those who knew he held a bloodline. Zabuza on the other hand, remembered similar looks directed towards the fourth Mizukage. As they were walking down a particular street, Zabuza glanced at the blonde. There weren't many other reasons why a child would be treated this way in his own village, especially one as peaceful as Konoha. Just about every ninja knew of the Kyuubi's attack, and the boy in front of him seemed to be the right age. It added more substance to his theory when his hearing, honed by his mastery of the art of silent killing, overheard whispers of Fox Boy and other similar names from the villagers. He had to admit, he was intrigued if he was right. The power of a Jinchuriki combined with a Rinnegan. There would be no limits to the boy's potential if his suspicions were correct. Sakura and Sasuke also noticed the glares the blonde received. They rarely saw him outside the academy or team meetings, so this was the first time they'd noticed how the people of the village looked at him. Sasuke was slightly intrigued, but for the most part didn't care. Sakura found herself curious as well about why he was being glared at, though she soon dismissed it as the result of one too many pranks. Hey, kid. Are there any good places to eat around here? Zabuza asked as their tour neared its end. Naruto grinned, the thought of his favorite food was almost always enough to lift his mood. I know a great place. Hey, how about we all go there to celebrate? Sakura smiled and turned to Sasuke, but before she could say anything, Sasuke scoffed and turned away. Not interested. The Uchiha said as he started towards his compound, his hands in his pockets and aloof expression on his face. He wanted nothing more than to return to his home. The revelation that the Sharingan wasn't the most powerful Dojutsu in the village anymore, he was certain his clan's Dojutsu was superior to the Hyuga's Byakugan, and vice versa, let alone that the more powerful Dojutsu belonged to the dead last of all people, not to mention the events in Wave, had increased his desire for power tenfold. He was determined not to let Naruto surpass him, Rinnegan or not. Come on, Sasuke, it's my treat. Naruto called out. Sakura turned to the blonde, obviously surprised. You actually want him to come with us? Naruto looked to the ground and narrowed his eyes. It was obvious he didn't particularly want Sasuke to come along. Well, he did take about 100 needles for me. I think I kind of owe him. Naruto replied. Haku looked away nervously at that. Sasuke didn't seem to care. First of all, why should I waste my time? Secondly, if you owed me, I wouldn't squander a favor on something frivolous like this anyway. Naruto glared at Sasuke's retreating figure. Fine then, be that way. He then turned to Sakura hopefully. Sakura, want to come? Well, Sakura began. Hang on a moment. A familiar voice called out. The three genin, Haku and Zabuza, turned in the direction of the voice to see Kakashi appear in a body flicker. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto said. Zabuza smirked behind the bandages that masked his face. Heh, old man done chewing you out, Kakashi. The other masked ninja didn't respond to that. Kakashi nonchalantly turned to his fellow masked ninja. Huh, you say something Zabuza? Far away, Guy felt the urge to curse his eternal rival's hip attitude and challenge him once again. Zabuza simply scoffed. Sasuke turned away. Unless you're going to suggest we start training, I'm not interested. Kakashi turned to the last Uchiha in Konoha. Hold on, I've got something I need to say to all of you. Sasuke stood still for a moment before turning around and facing him. Naruto and Sakura were already giving him their attention. Alright, listen up. I know I haven't been serious about teaching you until now. By all accounts, I should have taught you the tree climbing exercise long before our trip to Wave. Lord Hokage made it clear he won't tolerate that kind of negligence on my part anymore, and I'm sorry for neglecting you the way I have. The copy ninja said, pausing for a moment and letting his words sink in. Starting tomorrow, your training will begin in earnest. There won't be much time to devote to team building exercises, but I want you three to work as a more cohesive unit. I think spending more time together, or any time together at all, outside our training would be a good start. He then turned to Sasuke, the look in his eye leaving no room for arguments. So, we will be getting something to eat together, and no Sasuke, this is not negotiable. Sasuke simply scoffed, but returned to the group. Good, now Kakashi then turned to the Rinnegan bear, giving him his eye smile. Since Naruto was so kind as to offer, our meal will be on him, so the least we can do is let him decide where we eat. Naruto grumbled and Sakura smiled and playfully stuck her tongue out at him. Zabuza smirked under his mask and even Sasuke grinned slightly at the blonde's misfortune. Zabuza raised an eyebrow. A ramen bar. Naruto had led the group to his favorite eatery, the Ichiraku ramen bar. Kakashi sighed. I should have known he practically lives off of this stuff. Naruto ran into his favorite eatery with his toothy grin. Hey, old man. How've things been? Naruto. Good to see you. Tucci smiled at his favorite customer. His daughter, the ramen waitress Am joined him, smiling at the return of the blonde, who she considered family. Hey Naruto. Where have you been? Did you just get back from a mission? Yep. Me and my team are showing these guys around the village. Naruto said, gesturing towards the others who were entering the bar behind him. Tucci looked surprised to see Zabuza. He may not have known who he was, but it was obvious the man was a powerful ninja. That's so. Well, what do you think of our village so far? Zabuza shrugged. Nice place. Though it doesn't have the feel of a ninja village, if you ask me. It's too relaxed around here. Kakashi turned to his fellow jonin as he entered the bar. Well, that's some of the appeal of our village. Am, curiosity overcoming her, had to ask. So, is there any particular reason why you're the one showing them around? Naruto was first to answer the question, and soon he, along with Sakura and occasional input from Kakashi, Zabuza and Haku, began to explain the details of their mission, leaving out some sensitive topics such as Naruto's eyes of course, as the stand owners took their orders and brought their food. By the time they were finished with the explanation, 3 of the teens were halfway through their first bowls. Zabuza and Kakashi had somehow finished theirs and replaced their masks quickly enough so that no one could peek, and Naruto was on his 4th. Wow, you're just starting out and you get a mission like that? Am asked in shock. It was obvious to anyone, ninja or not, that the team had gotten in over their heads. Yep, amazing huh? Our first real mission and we save an entire country. I always said I'd be an awesome ninja. Naruto grinned. Well, congratulations. To celebrate and to welcome our new citizens, all of your first bowls on the house. Tucci announced. Haku looked up, slightly surprised by Tucci's generosity. Really? That's very generous of you. Are you sure that's alright? Tucci waved off his concerns. Don't worry about it. Like I said, it's my way of welcoming you to the village. Besides, Naruto will more than make up for it. Zabuza glanced at the blonde, who had just started his fifth bowl with no less enthusiasm than his first. Yeah, and then some. You weren't kidding about him living off of this stuff, I see. Hey Kakashi. Sasuke spoke up for the first time since they got there. What are the Chunin exams like? Well, Kakashi began, his students looking at him anxiously. I can't say. What? Oh, come on, Kakashi-sensei. Naruto complained. Kakashi chuckled and I smiled at the blonde. It wouldn't be very fair if I told you, now would it? Naruto turned to Haku. I take it you never took one of the exams, did you? The older teen replied that he hadn't, and the blonde turned to the demon of the mist. Well, what about you then, Zabuza? Any info on what we'll be up against? Even if I wanted to tell you, kid, I wouldn't know. The exams are always different and vary depending on which village it's held in. Zabuza replied. I guess it's to be expected they're not the same every time. Noted Sakura, slightly disappointed. Though she wasn't particularly enthusiastic about it, if her teammates, especially Sasuke, wanted to go through with it, so would she. Wait, it's not always in our village. Kakashi shook his head, most allied or neutral villages send genin to participate in the exams. They should arrive just before they begin. The exams are held in one of the participating villages. You're in luck, it's our village's turn this time around. Why are we taking our exams with foreign ninja? Sakura asked. That'll be explained during the exam. Kakashi replied. How are exams in the same villages different? Inquired Sasuke. Well, the proctor, a jonin or special jonin from the hosting village, decides on the tests. Of course, different proctors means entirely different tests and they make sure to never give repeat performances. Kakashi replied. Sasuke nodded, satisfied by the information. I can tell you this much. Everyone sent to participate in the exam will be skilled ninja in their own right. Many elites among genin from all over the elemental nations will be participating. It won't be easy for you. Sakura looked a little nervous while Naruto looked excited, as did Sasuke, though one could only barely tell. Fortunately, I intend to make sure you three are ready when the time comes. At night, Sasuke walked into the secret area in the Naka Shrine, his clan's secret meeting place. He had to admit, he was a little anxious to do this, to see the secrets of his deceased clan. Itachi had instructed him to discover those secrets on that terrible night all those years ago, but he'd been unable to. It hadn't taken him long to figure out the Sharingan was necessary to decipher what was written there. For years, the information contained on it eluded him, but now he finally had what he needed. As he stepped into the secret meeting place in the Naka Shrine, he briefly glanced at the tapestries on the walls of the room before his eyes turned to the tablet that held all the secrets of his clan. He grinned as he activated his Sharingan and began to read, soaking up the knowledge left behind by his nearly extinct clan. Minutes later, his expression fell into a scowl. Though many of the previously indecipherable secrets of his clan were now clear as day to him, a lot was still impossible to read. Apparently, the basic Sharingan could only translate so much. He'd need the Mangekyo to read more, though what he had discovered had been interesting, to say the least. The Sharingan possessed a power he'd never suspected. The power to control the nine-tailed demon fox. It also revealed some facts about the beast. Most notably, that it couldn't truly be killed. So then, how did the fourth Hokage defeat it? Not that it really mattered to him. That power would be of no use against Itachi, who had a more powerful Sharingan, anyway. Still, it made him curious how his clan was linked to the fox. Naruto stood in his apartment bathroom, looking at his reflection, the purple-ringed eyes he'd have to live with for the rest of his life staring back at him. Channeling Chakra them, his vision once more became black and white as his eyes activated. He raised his hand and looked at his arm, faintly seeing the chakra coursing through his arm and seeing it clearly around the extremity like blue fire. He deactivated his eyes, letting color return to his vision, and thought about everything he had learned over the course of the day. He thought about the offer made by the old man he considered a grandfather, pass and become a Chunin and learn about his family. As he thought about that, his mind flashed back to the academy, his constant losses and his and Sasuke's battle with Haku, and he grimaced. Alone, he allowed his mask of confidence fall as he recalled his failures and how completely outclassed he was by Haku. He couldn't afford to risk screwing this up. One of the things he had always wanted to know, the truth about the family he never had, was at stake. Starting tomorrow, he would take being a ninja seriously. If he let this chance pass him by, he'd never forgive himself. Zabuza and Haku stepped into the apartment they had been assigned after finishing the first of several interviews they would have with the Hokage, which would end in full mental and physical evaluations. They would be allowed to keep some things to themselves, but they would have to reveal several secrets of their homeland and basically everything about their time wandering the nations, but this was to be expected. The two ex-missing ninja inspected the home with a critical eye as the Anbu who had shown them to it departed. It was a decent two-bedroom apartment. Well, it's better than sleeping in the woods, that's for sure. Zabuza noted and Haku nodded. So, this place everything you hoped it'd be? Yes. From what I've seen, the village is much like they described. Haku answered. Yeah, from what I've seen, you should feel right at home. This place fits your ideals. Zabuza replied. It was a bit too peaceful for him, but he'd adjust. It was better than wandering from place to place with no real future. Although Haku began and Zabuza glanced at him. The way they looked at Naruto, it reminded me of the glares I received that day. Zabuza knew he was referring to the day his parents died. This land is much more peaceful than our homeland and its people seem welcoming. Why would they treat the boy in such a way? I have a hunch. Zabuza replied. It's become common knowledge for those around at the time that around 12 years ago, the nine-tailed demon fox attacked this village. It could be that he's the same as Yagura. Haku's eyes widened in shock. Well, either that or his old man did something he's being blamed for. Either way, if it matters, we'll find out soon enough. You have a point. Though, it's depressing to think such prejudice exists, even in a village like this one. Zabuza didn't respond as he continued inspecting the apartment. The next day, the three genin of Team 7, Zabuza and Haku, all stood around the posts of the third training ground. Zabuza leaned against a tree with his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed in annoyance. We've been here for half an hour. How long does this bastard expect to keep us waiting? Zabuza growled. You should probably get used to it, Kakashi-sensei is always like this. Sakura commented. Yeah, he'll probably be here in an hour or two with some lame excuse like a black cat crossed my path, Naruto added. You're joking. Haku stated as he and Zabuza looked skeptically at the genin. Sasuke scoffed. If only. Between this and his antics, I had a hard time believing the guy was a jonin until I saw him fight. Well, screw waiting around. Zabuza said as he stepped away from the tree. He then grabbed the hilt of his sword. I was planning on testing you three to see exactly what I was working with anyway. Since Kakashi can't be bothered to be on time, let's get started right now. Sakura paled while Naruto grinned and Sasuke smirked. Good, I've been waiting for this since we left Wave. Naruto said. Do you want me to participate? Haku asked his father figure. No, Haku. Just watch and analyze their abilities. Haku nodded and vanished in a burst of speed, reappearing on the branch of a tree, placing his hand on the trunk as he looked at the four. Alright, show me what you three can do. Don't expect me to hold back just because you're brats. Kakashi arrived at the training ground about 2 hours earlier than he would have prior to his admonishment at the hands of the third, to find Zabuza standing over the fairly beaten forms of Naruto and Sakura, with Sasuke trapped over the nearby stream and a water prison held by a clone, glaring at the real former Miss Jonin. Zabuza sighed. You guys have a long way to go still, I suppose two of you could make it through the exams as you are now if you're lucky. The missing nin then turned to Sakura, who was still laying on the ground. You on the other hand, unless you work your ass off for the next 2 months, you won't have to worry about passing. You'll be more concerned about surviving. Looks like I arrived at a good time. Kakashi commented, ignoring Zabuza's glare as he strolled into the training field. Where the hell have you been? You kept us waiting so long, we got started without you. Zabuza growled, annoyed with Kakashi and with how much work two of the genin would need. As he said these words, his clone dispelled, falling apart into water along with Sasuke, who, as he hadn't mastered water walking, fell into the water and began to swim to his team. Well, a black cat crossed my path so I had to take the long way. From there, I'm afraid I got lost on the road of life until I found myself here. Zabuza's eye twitched in annoyance. Anyway, I got something that I thought would be useful on the way. So, how'd they do? Zabuza scoffed. Quite frankly, Kakashi, they suck. He then gestured toward Sasuke, who had just reached the shore. The Uchiha brat's alright. He's got a good balance of ninjutsu and taijutsu, and his Sharingan let him follow my moves. Lot of good that does if he can't keep up with his opponent, though. He's lucky Haku tried so hard not to kill him back at the bridge. Sasuke, who had just climbed out of the water, grit his teeth but knew he was right. Kakashi nodded as the two dry genin of his team sat up. Your thoughts on Sakura? Zabuza deadpanned. She's a fangirl who's completely useless in a fight. I really have to question your village's standards for letting her graduate. She has no unique talents and her taijutsu's pathetic. Hey, take that back. Sakura yelled indignantly, insulted enough to voice her objection, despite still being slightly afraid of the man who almost killed her team. Yeah, don't say things like that about her. Naruto yelled. Although she found him annoying, Sakura was grateful Naruto had her back. Girl, the other two at least put up a decent fight. You didn't last 5 seconds once I turned to you. Zabuza said simply. Do you train at all outside of what Kakashi required of you, which from what I've heard has been minimal? Have you really tried to improve yourself as a ninja at all since you graduated? Did you actually contribute to your team at all back at Wave? Sakura looked crestfallen as she couldn't refute his statements. I rest my case. Listen closely, they say a team is only as strong as its weakest link. Although that's not entirely the case, when one individual has mediocre skill, the rest of the group has to make up for it, lowering success and more importantly, survival rates. Ninja like you tend to bring the whole team down, either by not contributing or being targeted and likely captured when the enemy recognizes their lack of talent and singles them out. Unless you improve, you're a liability that could get your entire team killed one day. Sakura's mood continued to sink like a stone in a vast ocean of despair. Kakashi quickly decided to reassure his student. Now, don't worry, Sakura. You can still become a splendid kunoichi. It'll just take some work. Yeah, a lot of work. Zabuza added bluntly. Alright, what are her strengths? Well, she has an untapped talent for genjutsu and natural near-perfect chakra control. She was able to get the tree climbing exercise on the first try. She also had the highest written test scores back at the academy and has decent analytical skills. Kakashi explained. Though those tend to go out the window whenever Sasuke's involved. Zabuza scoffed. Those tests mean nothing in the field. Although, we could work with that intellect. Haku stepped forward. If she is good at memorizing facts, I could teach her what I know of the human body as well as medicinal herbs. I'm sure she'd also excel in the creation and use of poisons. If you know of someone with the talent, if she manages to memorize the human body, she'll likely make a good medical ninja. The field I myself am interested in, but was never able to find a proper teacher for. Naruto looked slightly confused. Medical ninja. What, you mean first aid? Why would she need a teacher for that? A medical ninja is someone trained to use chakra to heal injuries. The most skilled among them can even heal life-threatening injuries in moments on the battlefield, though it consumes a lot of chakra. Kakashi explained. I was also thinking she could make a good medical ninja, she reminds me a lot of one I knew. Kakashi trailed off, remembering Rin, which led him to think about his lost team. His years as a shinobi and natural aloofness allowed him to perfectly mask his sense of melancholy that came with them. Wow, that sounds awesome. Naruto grinned. He knew he wouldn't really need something like that, even he knew his healing wasn't normal. But he could see how useful such an ability would be. HN, you might go farther than I thought. Sasuke spoke up. Sakura was torn between being happy Sasuke thought there might be hope for her or sad that he obviously thought little of her current abilities. She decided on the former, as Zabuza's earlier statements had made her somewhat realize that, at the moment, she was indeed largely useless. Of course, we'll have to work on her stamina, too, Kakashi said. As for the blonde brat, Zabuza gestured towards the Jinchuriki. The kid has a knack for coming up with unpredictable strategies and his taijutsu's passable, but aside from that in the clones, his stamina and his taijutsu, which he doesn't know how to use yet, he's got nothing going for him, not to mention the fact that outside of strategies, he's not the fastest deer in the forest. Hey! Naruto yelled indignantly, raising a fist into the air. Sasuke, blunt as ever, stated, Naruto, you're the dead last of our class. Weeks ago, I remember you didn't even know the proper spelling of chakra. Naruto growled, but Kakashi spoke up before he could respond. Yes, well, I have something in mind that will take care of that. Well, I hope whatever you've got in mind works. Kid's not going to make it far as a ninja at this rate. Zabuza commented before turning to Naruto. And why didn't you try using those eyes of yours? Naruto, still irritated at Zabuza's evaluation, replied, I can't use them and clones in the same time, and I don't know how to use their powers yet. I figured I was better off sticking with what I knew. Maybe you're a little smarter than I gave you credit for. Using a power you're not familiar with is a good way to wind up dead. Zabuza's eyes narrowed after giving the backhanded compliment. Wait, what do you mean you can't use them and your clones? Naruto shrugged. Whenever I use them both, I see out of my clone's eyes too. Seeing everything like that makes my head spin. Kakashi stepped forward, intrigued. Is that so? Interesting. I want to see this. Activate your taijutsu and create a shadow clone. Naruto nodded and closed his eyes, channeling chakra into them before opening them. He then made a cross-shaped hand seal and called out the name of his most used jutsu, causing a single clone to appear in a poof of smoke. The two Narutos already seemed slightly disoriented, though not enough that it would keep them from fighting, and the others looked on, obviously interested in finding out anything about the eyes. Now, close your eyes, just the real you. Naruto did as told. Now, tell me, how many fingers am I holding up? He said, holding up 2 fingers, when the clone opened his mouth. Kakashi stated, the real you. 2. Naruto immediately said, despite having his eyes closed. Kakashi raised a brow before holding up 4 fingers. 4. He said as Zabuza picked up a rock. Kakashi put down 1 finger. 3. Zabuza then threw the rock at the blonde's head. Naruto saw it through his clone's vision and caught it, opening his eyes and glaring at the former Kiri ninja. "Hey, what gives, Zabuza-sensei?" Zabuza smirked beneath his mask. "Just another test for ya, kid." Naruto's glare intensified. "Besides, I was hoping to show the usefulness of that ability. So, do you see how this could increase your effectiveness?" "Huh?" Naruto replied, before thinking about it. "Well, I guess if I could get used to it, I could see the battlefield from different points and see the enemy, even if they're in my blind spot, or I could use them to scout ahead and spy on enemies." Zabuza nodded approvingly. "Good. Were it not for that and the stunt you pulled back when we first met, I may have dismissed you as a lost cause by now." Naruto glared at the demon of the mist before Kakashi spoke up. "Though I wouldn't be as harsh as Zabuza, I remember how you told me even you had to admit it was foolish to enter Haku's ice mirrors without thinking as you did. You can't deny you could stand to improve your mind, though that's always a good idea. You could also stand to learn the value of patience." Naruto looked slightly dejected at that. "Fortunately, as I said, I have an idea for how to catch you up in that respect, and every other for that matter." Naruto's expression brightened at that. "Really? What is it? Let's hold off on that until we begin training." "Now, before we move on," Kakashi began, reaching into his pocket and pulling out 5 slips of paper. "We may as well get this out of the way," he said. "Ah, you're going to test their affinities? Not a bad idea," Zabuza stated. Naruto quirked an eyebrow. "Affinities?" "Yes, your nature or elemental affinities," said the copy ninja. "You don't remember? They explained this to use in the academy," Sakura said, raising her hand and pointing her index finger to the sky as she began to explain. "There are 5 basic elements. Water, earth, lightning, wind and fire. Obviously, Sasuke's fire-style jutsu or Zabuza and Kakashi's water jutsu are good examples. Everyone has a predisposition towards a single element." Naruto smiled. "Oh, I get it. So, you're going to see what our elements are, Kakashi-sensei." "That's right. You're going to channel your chakra into these. How your chakra affects them will depend on your affinity." For example, he channeled his chakra into the paper and they all watched as it wrinkled. "My affinity is lightning, so my chakra will cause the paper to wrinkle. Fire-natured chakra will cause it to ignite and turn to ash, water will cause it to grow damp, earth will turn to dirt, and wind will cause it to split in 2. "But, what about Haku's ice element?" Naruto asked. Kakashi gave a nod. "Good question. Haku, if you don't have a problem with it," he said as he held out another piece of chakra paper to the boy. "It's no problem." Haku replied before taking the paper and doing as Kakashi did. The paper split in half and grew damp. "My ice element Kekkei Genkai allows me to combine the water and wind elements to create ice. So, no one else can use it because they don't have both affinities?" Naruto asked. "Well, there's more to it than that," Kakashi replied. "Even if you have both affinities, it's very difficult if not impossible to combine the 2 elements together unless you have the Kekkei Genkai for it. Although, the 3rd Tsuchikage possesses something more advanced." "What do you mean?" Haku inquired. "Ah, yeah, Enoki of both scales," Zabuza stated. "He uses the dust element, a Kekkei Toda or bloodline selection. It combines the fire, earth and wind elements to manipulate molecules, allowing him to reduce his opponents to dust." The black-haired Jonin explained, shocking the younger shinobi. Kakashi nodded. "The dust element was taught to him by the second, who he had no relation to as far as I know, implying that all one needs to use it is the proper training and the 3 affinities, although, possessing 2 of the affinities is very rare outside of bloodline holders," Kakashi explained. "There are also the ninja of the land of snow, who use the ice element. Though in their case, rather than combining elements to create ice, all they can do is use their chakra to manipulate already existing ice and snow. Their abilities can't compare to the real thing." Haku seemed slightly surprised that there were other ice elements users, even if they didn't hold the bloodline. "In any case, let's get started. And just to be safe, we'll test Sasuke's too." Sasuke's eyes narrowed and Naruto looked slightly confused. "Why? I mean, don't we already know his element?" "No, we know he can use fire jutsu. I can use jutsu of all the elements, although I only have the affinity for lightning. The affinity makes it much easier to learn to use the element and its jutsu, and few ever truly master more than 2, their affinity and 1 other. The only reason I can use so many is because I've copied jutsu of the other elements. I'm not known as the man who copied a 1000 jutsu for nothing," he said with an eye smile at the end, reminding the others that, despite his attitude and laziness, he was one of the village's strongest jonin. The Uchiha take pride in their affinity for fire and teach all their members to use it. They even view learning the fireball technique as their coming-of-age test, so it's doubtful they actually tested his affinity, did they, Sasuke? He turned to the Uchiha, who glared but said nothing. As I thought. Now, ladies first. He said, handing a slip of paper to Sakura. Sakura took it and channeled chakra into it. In moments, the slip of paper turned to dust and crumbled away. The pink-haired girl looked at her now empty hand. I have the earth element. Kakashi hummed. The earth element, with it, one can harden and strengthen anything they channel it into, increasing its defensive and destructive power. You can also manipulate dirt and mud and move through the earth in various ways. He turned to Sasuke with an eye smile. Like when I buried Sasuke up to his neck. Sasuke glared at his sensei before his gaze turned the Jonin's hand as he handed him his own piece of paper. Your turn. Sasuke closed his eyes and snatched the paper from the Jonin. He glanced at it as he channeled his chakra into it and his eyes widened in shock as the paper wrinkled. What the? Was all the Uchiha could say. Well, what a surprise. It seems you don't have the fire affinity after all. Kakashi commented. Sasuke continued to stare at the paper in shock. But my entire clan has the fire element. Yes, well, clans are never completely uniform in affinities outside of those with elemental bloodlines. I guess you're just one of the unique ones. Kakashi mused. Naruto snickered. Too bad, Sasuke. Looks like you're the black sheep. If looks could kill, Naruto would have been reduced to a smoldering corpse by Sasuke's glare. Kakashi said. Now, your turn. Naruto grinned. Finally. He took the piece of paper and did as his teammates had and watched the piece of paper grow damp. Before anyone could comment, an unexpected series of events left everyone's mouths agape. The damp piece of paper wrinkled before splitting in half, one half then burned to ash, while the other turned to dust. Zabuza's brow furrowed. The hell? Hey Kakashi-sensei. I thought you said it was rare that anyone has more than one affinity. Sakura said. Well, I guess this is proof that his eyes are the real thing. What do you mean? Naruto asked. It said that the Rinnegan grants its bearer the ability to master all 5 elements and virtually any jutsu, not counting those that require bloodlines. I guess that would include possessing all the affinities. Kakashi explained. So, I can learn every element? Naruto asked excitedly. Sasuke once more glared at the blonde, seeing another example of the Jinchuriki's growing power. Kakashi nodded. Yes, though it will take time. Do you think I could learn to use Haku's eye style, too? You did say any technique. Kakashi cupped his chin and hummed in thought, looking to the sky. Well, that's what the legends say, and since you have all the elements, considering the dust element is similar and requires no such bloodline, it's possible. In theory, anyway. We'll have to be sure and explore the possibility. He said before looking back to the genin. Now, I figured Zabuza would get impatient and get started before I got her, so I brought lunch. Let's get started once we've finished eating. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat in his office, once again taking up his endless battle against paperwork while taking the occasional puff from a pipe in his mouth when he heard a knock on his door. Hiruzen raised his head and quirked a brow. Come in. He beckoned. The door opened to reveal his former friend and rival, Danzo Shimura. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed. In their youth the two had been competitive, but they had been on good terms, but as they grew up, many of their philosophies, specifically, how the village should be run, had changed and were now nearly opposite. They were still on decent terms and, so long as nothing went wrong, Danzo rarely interfered with the way he ran the village, beyond voicing his own, conflicting opinion. Still, the man rarely came to his office without a reason. It's been a while, Lord Hokage. It's good to see you're still managing. The Warhawk of Konoha said. Hiruzen gave a slight chuckle. I still have a few years left in me. But don't you think you should worry more about yourself? You're almost as old as I am. Indeed this is true. Danzo said, turning to the window and looking out the village both loved and desired to protect in their own ways. Time will soon pass us by. I can only hope the next generation lives up to the challenge. He said before turning back to his old rival. And hopefully, they don't take the teachings of the Senju to heart. Hiruzen's eyes narrowed slightly. It would be better if they found their own way, based on their experiences. Hiruzen nodded, inhaling deeply before breathing out a plume of smoke. Enough beating around the bush. What has brought you here? I have heard that you have allowed the infamous demon of the mist a chance to join our village. Danzo replied. I merely wished to inquire why you would give him a chance. It's a long story, the short version is that the purpose of his coup was to stop the Mizukage from destroying their nation with his prejudice against bloodlines, and he was vouched for by 2 people whose intuition I trust, one of whom being Kakashi Haddock. Know that I am keeping him under observation and intend to speak with him more on these matters. Do you intend to have him interrogated? With his knowledge, several of the Land of Mist secret arts could be ours. Danzo inquired. And perhaps it would be wise to have some insurance in case he decides to use our trust to get back into Kiri's good graces. I believe his student is young and quite skilled. Perhaps he would benefit from my old teaching methods. If we could ensure his loyalty to our village, I'm sure keeping Zabuza under control would be a simple task. No. Well, I do intend to give him and his apprentice the standard interviews and evaluations one would expect. I will not force him to reveal his village's hidden jutsu, and he will be allowed to keep some things confidential. And we will certainly not use the boy against him, that isn't how this village operates. Danzo's eye narrowed. Once more, your sentimentality prevents the tree that is our village from growing stronger. It is a shame that you follow your sensei's views so wholly. Hiruzen met his glare before Danzo turned towards the door. In any case, I can rest easier now. The man said, turning to the door. In truth, he intended to make his own observations as well. He already knew how the former Chunin was working with Kakashi's team and believed it foolish that Hiruzen had allowed the man to get close to the last Uchiha in their village and their Jinchuriki. Though, with Kakashi near and Zabuza's own skill, he likely wouldn't be able to spy on their training. He would make sure the man wasn't doing anything that could potentially harm their village. And if he did, Danzo was interested in restarting Orochimaru's experiments on bloodline transfusion. Even if he was not allowed to use him against the demon of the mist, the man's protege would provide a powerful new bloodline for the village and his followers in particular, provided his experiments were successful, and if not, he could still acquire the genetic material needed to restart the clan in Konoha. After the ninja finished their meals, the genin stood before the Jonin and Haku. Alright, I'll focus on Sasuke right now. Haku will take Sakura while Zabuza trains with Naruto. But first, you're going to learn a more advanced chakra control exercise. Kakashi said. Reactions among the genin were varied. Sasuke looked indifferent, Naruto looked glad to be trained by a jonin who was equal to his sensei, but more serious, and Sakura looked relieved. Now, as for the idea I spoke of earlier. Naruto, I want you to create 10 shadow clones. Why? Naruto asked. Tell me, have you ever noticed anything odd anytime you've used that technique? Kakashi inquired. No, I don't think so. Naruto replied, and Kakashi sighed. I guess I should have seen that coming. You rarely use them outside of a fight. Okay, Naruto listened closely. The blonde nodded. Whenever a shadow clone dispels, any experience or knowledge they gained is transferred to the user of the technique, understand? Sakura and Sasuke's eyes widened in shock at that, while Naruto just looked blankly. Naruto responded dumbly. Sakura groaned. Ugh, I can't believe you graduated. Zabuza face palmed. Kakashi, I hope this works, he said, already seeing where Kakashi was going with this. Yeah, you're not the only one, Kakashi replied. Alright, look at it this way. Let's say one of your clones were to read something. Naruto nodded. When it disperses, you would learn what it read, understand any better. Naruto looked excited. Yeah. Before he took on a confused expression. But, why didn't I notice that sooner? Like I said, you've never used them outside of battle. What they experienced was too similar to what you did for you to notice. Kakashi explained as he pulled out a scroll from his vest. Now, as I said, I want you to create 10 shadow clones. While we work on this new exercise, your clones will work on improving your mind. He then opened the scroll, revealing 10 books, including a dictionary, 1 book on anatomy, 1 book on math, and the remaining a few on the finer points of being a ninja. Could I use this to learn jutsu faster? Naruto asked excitedly. I think it would be best if you limit their use to gaining knowledge and catching up to your other classmates. This method of learning causes a great deal of mental strain. Kakashi replied. Besides, considering you were able to learn the shadow clone jutsu in a single night, I doubt that will be necessary. Alright. At least I'll be able to get all this without all the boring reading. Sucks for my clones though. Naruto grinned and did as he was told, his clones groaning at being forced to read, while Sasuke scowled. Kakashi. Why does the dead last get this special treatment? Couldn't you teach us this jutsu so we could train like this, too? Sasuke asked, more concerned about his own training than Sakura's. Kakashi shrugged. It's not special treatment. Naruto has unusually large chakra reserves. To be more exact, his reserves are massive, even compared to mine. Only someone with reserves as large as his could benefit from training like this. Creating enough clones to really take advantage of this method would cost anyone else too much chakra. Even I wouldn't be able to gain anything from it. Sasuke's scowl deepened. Now, before we begin training in earnest, we're going to teach you 3 to walk on water. What? Are you serious, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked. I take it this is more difficult than tree climbing. Sakura commented. That's right. Due to the shifting surface of the water, you have to constantly calibrate the chakra rather than maintain a steady flow, or you'll fall in anyway. Allow me to demonstrate. Kakashi said. They'd seen it before, but it was always during the heat of battle. The masked ninja casually walked over and onto to the stream, the water rippling at his footsteps as he walked to its center before turning to face them. Alright, your turn. Let's see if any of you can make it to me. The three genin nodded before running forward, focusing on their chakra until Naruto and Sasuke immediately noticed how much more difficult it was. Naruto made 10 steps before failing and falling into the water. Sasuke made it farther, but soon suffered the same fate as the blonde. As they both resurfaced, they looked over to see Sakura standing next to Kakashi, looking triumphant. That was easy. Well. Looks like I underestimated the girl. Zabuza commented. Well, this certainly causes a sense of deja vu, doesn't it? Kakashi commented, his gaze turning to his two submerged genin. It seems you've once again been outdone. At this rate, you may not make it to Chunin. After the tree climbing exercise, I expected you to work on your chakra control without my need to say so, but I guess I was wrong. I thought an Uchiha would know how important control is, but I guess, like most of your clan, you're all talk. Zabuza smirked beneath his mask as Sasuke's eyes, blazing with fury, turned to him. And Naruto, how will you ever live up to your end of the bargain you made with the Hokage at this rate? Don't you want to learn about your family? Kakashi's statement added fuel to Naruto's determination. Now, Sakura, you'll move to the next step. Next step? Sakura inquired. Yes, I'll let them take care of that. Kakashi responded, walking towards his two soaked students, as Sakura's eyes widened as they shot to the Miss Jonin. Zabuza's smirk widened. Good, as entertaining as it is to watch genin fail miserably, this is far more amusing. It's a lot more difficult to maintain control while in a fight, so you'll be sparring with Haku until controlling your chakra becomes second nature to you. Sakura paled as Haku stepped onto the water, an apologetic look on his face, before several senbon appeared in his hand and he fell into a combat stance. Prepare yourself, Sakura. Naruto walked down the streets of Konoha, covering his mouth as he yawned. The sun had only risen a few short hours ago, and most of the people of the village were still within their homes, leaving the streets almost empty. Making his way to the training ground his team frequented, the blonde raised his hand to his eye, moving his sunglasses out of the way before rubbing it. As he neared the gates, he saw his teammates coming from different directions. He smiled and waved at Sakura as she approached. Morning, Sakura. Naruto greeted before turning to Sasuke, his hand clenching as he glared at the Uchiha who glared back before scoffing and turning towards the training ground. Sakura sighed at their behavior before she and Naruto followed after their teammate. Geez, they're at it already. Ever since Wave they've been even worse, if that's even possible. Naruto turned to his crush. Hey Sakura. You think Kakashi-sensei's going to be on time today? Sakura looked at him as if he'd just asked if the sky was blue. You must be joking. You should know better than that by now. Naruto sighed, hanging his head down. Yeah, guess you're right. He then looked at her with a slight grin. Good thing we have Zabuza and Haku to help us out now, huh? I'm sure they won't keep us waiting until we're dead on our feet. Sakura shivered slightly at the thought of the former Kiri Jonin. Are you crazy? At least with Kakashi we didn't have to worry about him actually killing us. Haku seemed alright to her, though she did hold some negative sentiments towards him for what he did to Sasuke, but after nearly killing them and learning what she did about him, she still found Zabuza a frightening figure. Oh, come on. They're not that bad. Well, I guess Haku seems alright. Sakura admitted. At least they seem to take this seriously, unlike Kakashi. Sasuke spoke, adding his 2 cents. He does usually spend most of his time with us reading his book, I wonder what it's about, anyway. Naruto commented, looking to the sky before turning to his crush again with a smile. So, Sakura. How about after we finish training today you and I? Shut up, Naruto. Sakura suddenly yelled. Naruto backed away slightly when the girl balled her hand and raised her fist over his head, but was unable to get out of range before she brought it down on his head, causing him to kneel down, grabbing his now aching head. It's too early to deal with that. Aw, come on. He's not the only one with an awesome bloodline anymore. Naruto said as he raised his head, nursing the lump that had grown through his hair. He didn't think much of it yet. After all, he didn't even really know what they did yet besides what it did to his vision and those 2 abilities that he still had no idea how to use, but he hoped that might appeal to Sakura. And you think that makes up for everything bad about you? The pink-haired girl grumbled as she turned away before adding in a slightly wistful tone. His Sharingan isn't the only thing that makes him amazing. Sasuke seemed unaffected by her comment. Naruto hung his head dejectedly. Sakura. The trio soon reached the clearing, before stopping dead in their tracks, almost comical expressions of shock on the 2 more expressive genins' faces. Even Sasuke's eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly at the sight that awaited them. Zabuza and Haku had arrived before them. That, they had expected. What they hadn't expected was to see Kakashi leaning against a tree, reading his book, having arrived on time despite all the evidence that such a thing would never happen. Even more surprising was his reaction to their arrival. He glanced out of the corner of his exposed eye before putting his book away. He then stepped away from the tree and gave them a slight wave. Hey guys. The copy ninja greeted. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Naruto stared at him incredulously. Kakashi-sensei. You're actually on time. But you've never been on time. Not since the day we became a team. Sakura said, looking as if she thought the world might be ending. Have I really given you the impression that I can never be punctual? The copy ninja asked. Silence answered him. The Jonin sweat dropped. To be honest, he probably would have been late had the Hokage not threatened to give him missions with Guy and his mini-clone. If he didn't clean up that aspect of his act the previous night. It took all his discipline not to shudder at the thought. Well anyway, let's get started. We'll pick up where we left off yesterday. And Naruto, don't forget your clones. He said, pulling out a scroll. The blonde genin nodded and 10 clones poofed into existence. The doppelgangers groaned as Kakashi opened the scroll and gave them the books. Naruto looked up at his sensei as his clones reluctantly took the reading material. Hey, Kakashi-sensei. Why can't we move on to learning new jutsu? I mean, if the tree climbing exercise was enough to let us fight Haku, wouldn't it be better if we spent our time learning some cool new techniques? Sakura put a hand on her hip. Yeah right, what fight were you watching? In case you've forgotten, if Haku was more cold-hearted, you know, like most missing nin you're liable to run into, Sasuke would be dead. And for that matter, you'd probably be too. Hell, if you hadn't awakened your bloodline when you did, you probably would have ended up in the same condition as the Uchiha brat. Zabuza said to the blonde, who immediately looked to the ground. Kakashi nodded. They're right you know. You all have a long way to go before you reach Haku's level. That's just all I could teach you in the time we had. That aside, this is essential for you to learn. Think of it this way, with the control you had before you graduated, let's say you could create 2 standard clones. But the level of control you have now, you can create 3 clones using less chakra. In other words, the better your control, the more powerful your jutsu will be, and the less energy it'll take to use them. You need the most work in this respect, Naruto. Out of the 3 of you, your control is the worst, meaning you waste a lot of chakra in your jutsu. Understand? Naruto nodded somewhat reluctantly. Yeah, I get it. Zabuza turned a thoughtful eye to Kakashi. Speaking of wasting chakra, something's been bugging me for a while. Kakashi raised a brow. Oh? And what's that? Back at the bridge, that technique you tried to shove through my chest, it was basically a solid blade of lightning chakra, wasn't it? Sasuke looked up at that, now more interested because an apparently powerful technique of his element was being discussed. Kakashi nodded. That's right. It's my signature technique. Rikiri. The demon of the mist tilted his head. Something like that's gotta be a bitch on the reserves. In fact, I can't remember you using another jutsu for the rest of our fight or against those mercenaries Gato hired. On top of that, I know from an old acquaintance of mine that transplanted jutsu like your Sharingan take more chakra to use than they do in a natural wielder. My guess is you didn't have enough chakra to pull off another one of those, or any other high-level jutsu for that matter. So, why did you use that attack on me when I was pinned down by those hounds of yours and I couldn't move or defend myself? You could have just thrown a kunai for the same effect. The copy ninja remained silent as the group stared at him. You just wanted to be flashy and show off your best move, didn't you? Kakashi chuckled and gave them his eye smile as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Zabuza face-palmed while Haku gave the Jonin a neutral expression and the genin gave him looks that showed he'd lost some of their respect. You stupid bastard. Naruto's eye twitched, a tick mark developing on his forehead as he glared at his sensei. What was that you were saying about wasting chakra, Kakashi-sensei? For all you knew, Sasuke and I were still screwed and you go and tire yourself out like that. And he has the nerve to tell us not to waste our energy, Sakura thought. There are times I question how he made it to Jonin, Sasuke thought. Now. I had the utmost confidence in you. Kakashi spoke to the 3 genin in a placating tone, which obviously didn't work in the slightest, before turning back to the former Miss Danbu. And you know, you should be grateful I opted to use my best move. If I had simply thrown a kunai as you suggested, you would have died. Zabuza scoffed at that while Kakashi made a mental note not to waste chakra like that again. Hey, it's not too late to learn something new until you're dead. The silver-haired Jonin cleared his throat. Anyway, isn't it about time we got started? The other masked ninja let out another scoff before responding. Guess you're right. He crossed his arms and grinned under his mask as he turned to the sole female in the group. Hope you do better than you did yesterday, Pinky. You look like a pincushion by the time we were through. Sakura paled as she realized this meant she'd once more be dodging Haku's needles while trying to remain on the water. Haku once again gave the pink-haired girl an apologetic look as Kakashi walked across the water, the surface rippling at each step until he arrived at its center. Alright, come on. And try not to fall in this time. Kakashi beckoned. Naruto and Sasuke ran onto the water with Sakura close behind when she saw Haku pull out his needles. As the 2 male genin tried and failed to maintain their footing on the water's surface, Sakura struggled to dodge groups of 3 senbon apiece. After his 12th time having to climb out of the water, Naruto growled in frustration. Damn it, why can't I get this? It can't be that much harder than tree climbing, right? He turned to the other Genin, who had just climbed out of the water himself and was stumbling as he balanced himself on the water's surface. The blonde then turned to Sakura, wincing as he saw her get hit with another volley of senbon, despite her best efforts. He remembered what it was like to be on the receiving end of those needles. She makes this look easy. He then got an idea. He narrowed his eyes as he channeled his chakra into them, seeing the world fade to shades of black with white outlines as his Dojutsu activated. He had to admit that, though it was strange at first, the way he saw the world through his new eyes was invigorating. He could see everything in perfect clarity. He could detect every minute movement or shift in his field of vision. To him, their chakra, normally invisible unless in large amounts, could be seen clear as day. Although all Dojutsu could also see chakra in such a manner, only the Byakugan surpassed its perceptive capabilities in this regard. He could vaguely see it coursing through their bodies, though unlike the Byakugan, he couldn't completely see the chakra network or make out the Tenketsus. He saw the core of the chakra network, located in the center of the stomach, as a ball of blue fire, and he saw the same effect of dancing flames wherever chakra was being gathered. He watched as Sakura successfully dodged a few more waves of senbon, yelping as she twisted her body to avoid one group that nearly hit her side. The Rinnegan bear watched how her chakra flowed, absently noting that her chakra core didn't seem to be as bright as the others. He put that aside for now and returned to the task at hand. Watching his pink-haired teammate, he attempted to gauge the amount of chakra she was using to remain afloat and observed how the quantity was in constant flux to compensate for the moving of the water. He then turned and did the same for Kakashi. After watching both of them and how their chakra flowed for about a minute and channeling his chakra into his own feet to practice, he closed his eyes and climbed out of the water, doing his best to imitate Sakura's chakra flow, watching his feet and how his own chakra interacted with the river's surface. He stumbled twice before he came to a stop, holding his arms out to help balance himself. Naruto smiled at his success as he took a few shaky steps on the water's surface. Although he still had to concentrate hard to maintain it and his feet still slipped through quite a few times, this had definitely helped. Meanwhile, Sasuke, who had just climbed out of the water, threw a glare in Naruto's direction when he saw he was doing better. Though he couldn't figure out what Naruto was doing differently, he had tried what Naruto had earlier, only to find his Sharingan's ability to perceive chakra wasn't good enough to gauge such a thing. He climbed out of the water once more and, after a few minutes, fell back in. This time, he growled as he looked at Naruto, who was managing aside from the occasional incident where his feet sunk into the water. He climbed out once more, but lasted a mere 10 seconds, his anger causing his control to slip. Kakashi noticed his Sharingan-wielding student's frustration towards Naruto's faster progress, but before he could decide on what to do, Zabuza called him and Haku over. Raising a brow at what the former missing nin could want, he joined him and Haku on the river's shore. Naruto, who soon stumbled and turned his attention back to his feet, Sasuke, who was still in the water, looked curiously after the three. Sakura immediately stopped channeling her chakra and sunk into the water. She had long since passed the point of exhaustion and would have fallen in had it not been for the pressing need to dodge those needles. "You okay, Sakura?" the Jinchuriki asked as he carefully moved closer to her. "Zabuza-sensei wasn't kidding, I need to work on my stamina," the girl replied before turning her head to look at him. "How do you two keep this up? Hope you enjoyed your break, brats," Zabuza called out, getting their attention before his gaze fell the two male genin. "Your control is pathetic. What's your academy teaching you genin these days? You should have mastered tree climbing by the time you graduated and you should have progressed much farther than this after a day." The two glared at him. "I think you could do with some additional motivation. And Sakura, it's time to kick things up a notch anyway." He then nodded to Haku, who proceeded to make the tiger hand seal. "Water clone jutsu," Haku called out as water rose in front of him, forming 5 copies of himself, all of whom proceeded to pull out senbon. Sasuke's eyes narrowed as Naruto and Sakura paled. The blonde turned to his female teammate as the water clones lined up at the shore. "Sakura, I think you might have been right about Zabuza-sensei teaching us." The pink-haired genin could only nod. "You brats should know the drill by now," Zabuza said before his gaze turned slightly menacing. "And don't even think about trying to escape underwater." Naruto leapt into the air, dodging a wave of senbon before landing on the water's surface. He barely noticed how he and Sasuke too were now standing perfectly on the surface of the water. His attention was on the needles that could come flying at him from any direction and the dozen that were already painfully lodged in his flesh. The group had spent all day on this. There had been a few short breaks and lunch around midday. Out of the 3, he was in the middle in terms of damage. Sakura had fallen into the water due to lack of energy several times and had so many needles sticking out of her that the blonde wouldn't even bother to try counting them. Sasuke had about half the amount he had stuck in him. Unlike on the bridge, Haku televised his attacks and made sure his needles hit where they do the least damage. The three dodged Senbon for a few more minutes before Kakashi's voice rang out. Alright. I think that's enough for today. Haku stopped, his clones falling apart into water as he finally let up. Naruto and Sasuke breathed heavily as they took a moment to rest. Sakura made a slight groan of exhaustion before she simply fell face first into the water, flipping around and floating on her back, unable to even muster the energy to move to the shore. Naruto saw Sakura lying stagnant in the water and took a few steps towards her, his movements shaky due to his lack of control. "Sakura, are you alright?" Naruto asked as he approached her. Sakura groaned. "I've never been so exhausted, my legs feel like lead and I can't feel my arms. I don't think I could even make it to the shore," she said, the tone of her voice conveying her lack of energy to the blonde. Naruto allowed himself to sink into the water and wrapped his arm around her, pulling the pink-haired girl to the shore. "Thanks, Naruto," she said. Normally, she would be somewhat disappointed that Sasuke wasn't the one who helped her, but right now, she didn't care. "Don't mention it," the blonde replied as he swam back to shore with his teammate in tow. Sasuke, who had just reached the shore, looked back for a moment as Kakashi began to make a fire for his three soaked students. Cold he may be, but he wouldn't have left Sakura in the water. Seeing that Naruto was taking care of it, he began the task of pulling the senbon lodged in his skin out. Naruto soon reached the lake's edge and helped Sakura to the fire, sitting her down before they both joined Sasuke in removing the senbon stuck in them. The ice user looked down at the three genin. "Sorry, guys." Naruto looked up at the androgynous teen. "It's no problem, you were just doing as you were told," he said before wincing as he removed another needle. "Well, I have to admit this worked out well. We'll have to keep this up until you master the exercise," Kakashi said, causing the pink-haired girl to groan. "Hey Naruto." Sasuke spoke up, giving him a slightly irritated glance. Naruto looked a little surprised that Sasuke spoke up to him before he glared slightly at his fellow Dojutsu user. "What do you want?" Sasuke seemed to struggle with himself for a moment. He didn't like asking for help, and the last time he asked the blonde for help returned to the surface of his mind. After a moment, Sasuke responded. How did you suddenly improve back there?" Naruto's eyes widened before a mischievous glint appeared in them and a smirk spread across his face. "What do you mean, Sasuke?" he asked while shrugging his shoulders. The raven-haired boy gave him a fierce look. "You know what I mean." Naruto raised his hands in a placating gesture. Alright. I was just playing," he said, the smirk never leaving his face. "I just used my Dojutsu to see what Sakura and Kakashi were doing with their chakra and imitated it." Sasuke's eye twitched. "What? Don't tell me the Sharingan can't do that. Guess the Uchiha clan's not so great after all." His rival grit his teeth in anger at that. Sakura threw the blonde an angry stare. "Naruto, shut up and stop mocking Sasuke. Don't act all superior just because you have a better bloodline." She normally would have hit him for that, but 1, she was currently too tired and 2, she was kind of grateful to him for pulling her out of the water. Naruto squinted his eyes and pointed at the raven-haired genin. "But he thinks he's better than everyone because he's from the great Uchiha clan." He said the clan's name with sarcasm. He didn't think being from a great clan, even being the last survivor of a clan, made someone great or special. He thought his new eyes were kind of cool and would brag about them, but he didn't really think he was any more special than he was before either. What's wrong with rubbing in that his clan isn't so great after all? Maybe the fact that he's still the rookie of the year and you're still the dead last. Sakura replied sarcastically. "Those eyes might be the most powerful bloodline in the world, but that doesn't change that you're still a sorry excuse for a shinobi. And they're not going to do you much good until you actually learn to use them." Naruto hung his head down before his, and the other genin's attention was drawn by a laugh from Zabuza. "Ha. A sorry excuse for a shinobi. You're one to talk," he said, his eyes showing amusement. "Well, it's true, the kid needs a lot of work, at least he showed some talent back in Wave. I hate to admit that a genin pulled one over on me, but he did mastermind that trick during our first encounter, and he has managed to learn an advanced jutsu fresh out of the academy. So far, all you have going for you are chakra control and book smarts. If the two of you fought seriously right now, he'd beat your sorry ass into the ground." Now Sakura hung her head. Naruto, though grateful that for Zabuza's support, was about to protest what he said about Sakura when Kakashi spoke up. "Alright, settle down, guys," Kakashi commented before directing his gaze to the three genin. "It's nice to see you still have enough energy to fight amongst yourselves, but depreciating each other like this is hardly productive. Now, if you're all finished pulling the senbon out, I brought some snacks." Once the group had finished their snacks and the genin had completely dried off, they all got ready to leave. As Kakashi put the fire, the group had finished their snacks and the genin had completely dried off, they all got ready to leave as Kakashi put the fire out. "Sakura," Haku said, and the girl made a sound of acknowledgement. "I'd like you to read these," he said as he pulled out 4 books. Sakura raised a brow as she took them, looking at the cover of the one on top Encyclopedia of Plants. Haku nodded. The other three are on human anatomy, the making of healing salves, antidotes and poisons, and basic treatment of injuries. As I said, I believe you would make a good medical ninja. These are things you have to learn before you can really call yourself one. Even if you're not interested or it turns out that it's not your cup of tea, they're still an interesting read, or at least I think so. And it may come in handy someday. Sakura smiled. Though she still felt some slight ill will towards the boy for defeating Sasuke and making him appear dead, Sakura had to admit he was a nice person. Thank you, Haku. I'll be sure to take a look at them. The older boy smiled back. You're welcome. I hope there's no animosity from our training. Sakura shook her head. Nah, it's like Naruto said, you were just doing as you were told. She said before seeing Sasuke walking away. Hey Sasuke. How about we go get something to eat on our way home? HN. Was Sasuke's response before he walked away with his hands in his pockets, causing Sakura's shoulders to slump. Naruto noticed and said excitedly. I'd be happy to join you, Sakura. Sakura, too tired from all the training they did to yell at him, said, why would I want to hang out with you? And began walking off. Now it was Naruto's turn to slump his shoulders before he too began a slow march back to his apartment. He wondered if he'd ever catch a break with her. Sakura soon reached her house, made her way up to her room and fell backwards onto the bed, letting the book she was carrying fall beside her. She shivered as she remembered that they were going to do that again tomorrow. The pink-haired Kunoichi turned her head and glanced at the books beside her. She always did enjoy reading and prided herself on her book smarts. Taking the encyclopedia on plants and opening it to the first page, Sakura began reading. Half an hour later, she was thoroughly engrossed in what she was learning. The genin returned to the training ground the next day and spent the first half of their day dodging senbon on the water's surface. They continued until their break, when Naruto once again had to pull a completely exhausted Sakura out of the water. They had lunch together and now stood before their senseis. We're going to do something a little different today. Kakashi began, taking a few steps forward. You three are going to spar with each other, first Naruto and Sasuke, with a winner fight. Today, we want to focus on your taijutsu. Naruto raised a brow. What? He said, drawing out the word. But Kakashi-sensei, weren't we going to work on our chakra control some more? I think I almost got the hang of walking on water. Sasuke smirked. What's wrong? Afraid I'll put you in your place. Naruto glared at his teammate and snorted. Hardly. I'll be happy to kick your ass any day of the week. I just want to hurry and get to our elemental training so I can learn some cool new jutsu. Sasuke grunted in response. He had to agree with the Rinnegan bearer there. Though he was still a little irritated by the fact that he didn't have the affinity his clan prided itself on, he wasn't going to let that hold him back and he was looking forward to seeing what he could do with his element. Well, we felt that, since we were working on your chakra control, we should look at all your basic skills. They are important, you know. You'll suffer down the line if you skip ahead to the more advanced arts without mastering the fundamentals. Kakashi explained. Zabuza crossed his arms as he looked down at the genin. Once we see how far along you are with the basics, we'll correct anything that's lacking and work out what fighting style would suit you while perfecting your water walking skill. After you've got a handle on the basics and begun forming your own fighting style, we'll start your elemental training. You should be able to work all this out and at least learn a few elemental jutsu before the exams start. We'll also try to improve your teamwork, though as I mentioned earlier, we won't devote as much time to that. And if you learn quickly enough, we'll get you started on collaborative jutsu. Collaborative jutsu? Sakura inquired and Naruto looked at the Jonin with a curious expression. Those words also caught Sasuke's interest. The Uchiha frowned slightly as he listened intently. Collaborative jutsu refers to techniques that are a combination of several jutsu or a jutsu that requires multiple users. Zabuza explained. Kakashi nodded. For example, you've all learned that the wind element is weak to the fire element, right? If you were to try to combat a wind technique with a fire one, unless the wind technique is far more advanced and powerful, the wind will feed the flames and backfire on you. However, if you were to combine a wind technique with an ally's fire jutsu, Naruto grinned. I get it. You'll get a huge firestorm, right? Kakashi nodded. Correct. Another example would be a barrier technique that requires multiple users to create and maintain. Anyway, for that reason, we've decided to start Naruto off with the water and wind elements. That way, you'll have all the elements and potential combinations between you. Naruto looked excited as he thought of what lied ahead of them. And what about trying out sub-elements? I think you should master all the primary elements before you try to learn those, if you even can. You would need to master the compassing elements anyway, so even attempting that is a long way off. And of course, it wouldn't matter if Haku isn't willing to share his family's unique jutsu with you. Kakashi said, giving Haku a glance at the end. The androgynous teen shrugged. I don't mind. If he is capable of learning it, I have no problem teaching him my clan's arts." Kakashi gave the boy one of his eye smiles. "Glad to hear it," he said before moving to the center of the clearing. "Now, let's begin. Naruto, Sasuke, take your places. And Naruto, don't forget your clones." The two genin took their places, Naruto taking a few moments to create 10 shadow clones, who were given a scroll containing a few books by Kakashi and, after groaning about the titles and some coaxing, began reading on the outskirts of the training ground. Sasuke smirked as he got into his combat stance. "Ready to lose, Naruto?" Naruto gave a grin. "That's my line. Today's the day I finally wipe that smug look off your face. And your dreams, loser." The Uchiha scoffed. There was a moment's pause before Kakashi raised his hand. "Alright guys, no dojutsu okay? And begin." The two genin charged at each other, both looking forward to this fight. Naruto wanted to show his rival that he wasn't the same person he was in the academy, and Sasuke wanted, if subconsciously, to prove to himself that he was still above the blonde after the events at Wave. As Naruto neared his opponent, he threw a punch at the raven-haired boy. Sasuke grabbed his wrist with his right hand as the fist approached and redirected the blow, bringing his own fist up to deliver an uppercut to the blonde's face. Naruto leaned back, narrowly evading the attack before lashing out with a sweeping kick, forcing the Uchiha to let go of his hand and jump backwards. Before Sasuke had even landed on his feet, the blonde Jinchuriki had launched himself at his adversary. Having remembered the lessons from Wave, Naruto channeled Chakra to the bottom of his feet in order to increase his speed, allowing him to move faster than he normally could. This allowed him to close the distance between him and Sasuke very quickly. It was clear that Naruto had every intention of ending this battle as fast as possible to show Sasuke who the best ninja on this team was. The moment Naruto reached his raven-haired opponent, he reared his fist back near his head, as if winding up for the pitch, and shot it forward towards Sasuke's head. Even without the use of a dojutsu, it was clear that Naruto had pumped a lot of chakra into his attack, his entire fist was coated in writhing blue energy. The attack was one that would be quite devastating if it had actually hit. Sasuke had seen the punch coming quite a while before it was actually thrown. It was kind of not too with the way Naruto cocked his fist all the way back, like he was expecting the extra distance to increase the power. What he forgot to think about was that, even if it did increase the power, launching an attack from that position added to the length that his fist needed to move, which in turn increased the amount of time it took for his fist to go from point A to point B, with point B obviously being Sasuke's face. Therefore it came as no surprise to those watching when Sasuke was able to dodge the attack. A deft and nimble sidestep followed with a slight use of his hand to nudge the blonde's attack aside, caused it to miss entirely. At the same time, Sasuke quickly stepped into Naruto's guard, where he countered by landing a powerful blow on the blonde genin's stomach. This was soon followed up with a kick to the chest before Naruto could react, the results of which caused him to stumble back with a hand on his chest and a pained grimace on his face. Sasuke smirked as he watched Naruto lift his head and glare at him before jumping back into the fray. The two began to exchange blows, Sasuke deflecting Naruto's attacks and countering, while Naruto avoided most of the Uchiha's attacks. As the Jonin watched, Zabuza confirmed his assessment. Though it was true, the blonde's taijutsu was passable, but that was due to his strength and speed, which were decent, his style was more like that of a brawler than a ninja, and not really that effective. He relied on his unpredictable strategies, his stamina and his clones to overwhelm his opponents. Sasuke used his family's taijutsu style, and he had to admit he was good at it given his age. It didn't help the blonde that his opponent was faster than he was, making this fight fairly one-sided. Seeing Sasuke throw a punch at his chest, Naruto raised his arms and crossed them over his chest. Feeling his rival's fist collide with his guard, he prepared to launch a counter-attack before he felt the wind get knocked out of him. Capitalizing on the opening created when Naruto blocked his punch, the Uchiha had brought his knee to the blonde's stomach. As Naruto bent forward involuntarily, he saw Sasuke's fist rising towards his chest. Having no time to react, all he could do was watch the fist collided with his chest. The next thing he felt was a left hook to the face that sent him staggering back. He managed to stay on his feet, determined not to let his rival win again. He turned his head back just in time to see Sasuke running at him, intending to continue his assault. He brought his hand up just in time to block another blow from his adversary. The Uchiha heir narrowed his eyes when he saw Naruto block his punch. Before his opponent could retaliate, he spun around, extending his leg for a sweeping kick. Naruto jumped backwards to dodge. Naruto charged forward as soon as he touched the ground and threw a punch at the Uchiha's face. Sasuke ducked under the attack, grabbing the blonde's wrist and using his momentum to pull him forward. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as Sasuke pulled him forward before the dark-haired boy lashed out with a kick to his unprotected chest, knocking the wind out of him and sending him a few feet into the air. Sasuke leapt after him, delivering 2 punches and a kick to the blonde's torso before grabbing him as they fell to the ground, pinning the blonde on his stomach with his elbow to his neck. The Rinnegan bear growled, realizing he'd lost to his rival again. Well, I guess that's it. Kakashi said as Sasuke let the grumbling blonde up. Yeah, way to go, Sasuke. Sakura cheered from the sidelines. Alright girlie, you're up next. Take your place. Zabuza spoke, grinning under his mask as he saw Sakura's shocked expression. Kakashi nodded. That's right. You're up against Sasuke. Now come on. And please, try your best. After a few moments, Sakura hesitantly stepped up to her position across from her crush. The kunoichi took a deep breath before raising her head and looking at her teammate, who looked at her with a disinterested expression. Sasuke felt this was a waste of his time. He wanted to fight strong opponents. Naruto now counted among people he considered worth testing himself against after his actions in Wave. Sakura, not so much. Sakura got into a combat stance, not sure she'd be able to attack, but she'd at least try to defend herself. Both Jonin noted that her stance was the generic one taught to all students at the academy. After a moment, Kakashi once again raised his hand. Begin. What followed wasn't even worth being called a match. Sakura's stance at the beginning was a textbook perfect example of her chosen style, which was actually something of a problem. Now while having a perfect stance is a good thing, the technique taught at the academy was never meant to be anything more than a placeholder. It was a fairly balanced style with few openings, so it was fairly effective to be sure, but as it was a cookie-cutter method it didn't play to any individual ninja's strengths. Sure, one could take it in progress until one was a highly proficient Taijutsu fighter, but it would be better and easier to find a style that suited you. It was meant to give the prospective genin a way to fight and defend themselves while they learned what their strengths were until they found a fighting style that took advantage of their natural talents or to provide the building blocks for their own unique style. Sakura had never tried to deviate from it in the slightest. On top of that, although it may have had something to do with her crush on Sasuke holding her back, her stance fell apart when she actually moved. Her moves showed that her form was as good as it was due to the drills done at the academy, as they revealed a total lack of fighting experience. While it was expected that she fall for a feint, she shouldn't fall for all of them, and she often overextended herself on defense, her reluctance over fighting her crush keeping her from ever displaying offense. And she was slow, comparable to the average academy students 2 years her junior in both speed and reflexes. Sasuke did, at least, go easy on her. His attacks weren't meant to hurt her, simply to open up her guard so he could take her down easily. Okay, we've seen enough. Kakashi began. Sakura, Naruto, I'm not going to lie, both of you need a lot of work. Sasuke, your form's good, but there's always room for improvement. Naruto looked slightly dejected at the evaluation, and Sakura took it even worse. Sasuke simply grunted in acknowledgement. Now, we'll get started on perfecting your taijutsu styles for the next few hours. Sakura, I think Haku would be best suited to aid you. Naruto, I think Zabuza would be the best fit for you. And that leaves me to take care of Sasuke. Sasuke smirked at getting the teacher he considered the strongest, his satisfaction all the greater after his earlier defeat of his rival. Naruto looked shocked before clenching his fists. Of course. You're going to hand us off so that you can focus on Sasuke. He said angrily, emphasizing his rival's name. He was so tired of everyone treating Sasuke like he was the best. Sakura glared at the blonde. Naruto, don't talk to our sensei like that. She chided. Zabuza tilted his head to the side and raised a brow. Oh? You don't like the idea of training under me, brat? He asked in a slightly annoyed tone. No, I just don't like that he's playing favorites. Now, Naruto, calm down. I have my reasons for this. Kakashi said, moving his hand in a placating gesture. He actually wanted to train Naruto as much as he wanted to train Sasuke. The two were the last relatives of the deceased members of his team, not counting Sasuke's brother. But the less said about him, the better. Oh yeah? Like what? Zabuza's just better suited for what I have in mind for you, and I'm better suited to help Sasuke. Kakashi shrugged. One of my own teammates, from when I was a genin to a jonin, was in Uchiha, so I have a good grasp of their fighting style. I'm also the only other person in the village with a Sharingan. You Naruto, right now, are a power-type fighter. You overwhelm your opponents with your strength, which is how Zabuza fights when he's not relying on stealth. The explanation calmed the young Uzumaki down a bit, though he still looked annoyed. On top of that, I think you might have some untapped potential in stealth. You did manage to paint the Hokage monument without anyone noticing. Haku gaped while Zabuza gave his fellow jonin an incredulous stare. What? Kakashi shrugged. Shocking, isn't it? But true. He somehow managed to cover all the Hokage's faces in graffiti and no one noticed until he was almost finished. It should go without saying that such a thing is a quite impressive feat, especially in a ninja village. Naruto gave a prideful chuckle while Zabuza looked at the monument in disbelief. Yeah, and then he had to spend all day cleaning it up. Sakura reminded him, deflating the blonde. Fine, Naruto said after a pause before throwing Kakashi a light glare. I guess I can't complain. I am getting trained by the guy who threw you into a bowl of water, forcing your genin to bail you out. Zabuza chuckled as Kakashi's eye twitched slightly. Well, the kid and I might get along after all, Zabuza thought as Kakashi was reminded of his near death. Don't mock our sensei. Sakura admonished. Cha, you tell him. Her inner self spoke within her mind. Let's get started already. Come on, kid. Zabuza said, walking away and gesturing for the blonde to follow as Haku did the same for Sakura. The former Miss Ninja led the blonde into the forest until they found another clearing. Boy, let me be frank. I'm surprised you managed to graduate. He spoke in a blunt tone, causing Naruto's eyes to widen before his expression shifted into one of anger. The blonde took a step forward in an attempt at a threatening gesture. What? Until now, your control sucked. You fight like some brawler instead of a real ninja, you have no real stance or taijutsu style. And from what I've been told, you only know one jutsu outside the basic ones. If that stunt you pulled on the bridge is any indication, you don't even have a real grasp of the basics of shinobi combat. Let's face it, you haven't shown any actual talent. The only way you could possibly win a fight is by overwhelming your opponent with the sheer number of clones you can make. Shut the hell up. If that's true, then how did we get Kakashi-sensei out of that mess you put him in? Zabuza's eyes narrowed and Naruto smirked. What's wrong, embarrassed that you got outsmarted by a genin? Well, if you're so confident, why don't you show me what you've got? Gladly. Naruto said as he charged at Zabuza, activating his taijutsu as he closed the distance. Naruto reached into his weapon pouch and threw 4 shuriken at Zabuza, who easily deflected them all. Thinking he saw an opening as Zabuza knocked the last projectile away like the back of his hand, threw a punch aimed at the Jonin's chest. Zabuza easily caught the attack, brought his knee to the blonde's chest, and kicked him hard enough to send him across the clearing and into the tree hard enough to shatter the bark, causing splinters to rain down as the boy fell to the ground. Naruto shifted into a crouch and deactivated his taijutsu, bringing his hands together to form a cross-shaped hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a huge explosion of smoke, Zabuza found himself surrounded by clones. Zabuza gave a short laugh as the clones charged at him from every direction. None of them even lasted a second. Zabuza felled each clone in a single attack. Come on, kid. Do you honestly think this is going to help you? All the clones jumped back and launched shuriken at the former Miss Ninja from every direction. Zabuza grabbed his sword and spun, deflecting them all with a single movement, only for everyone to transform into a clone of the blonde. Zabuza scoffed, easily destroying all the clones. Only for his eyes to widen as Naruto's fist came out of the smoke cloud inches away from him. Using the smoke from the clones as a cover, pretty good, he smirked as he leaned back and spun, extending his leg and kicking the blonde, sending him into the ground, bouncing twice before coming to a stop on his stomach. Naruto got on one knee, wiping some blood off of his mouth as the remaining clones prepared to launch themselves at the masked Jonin, who simply crossed his arms and waited. The Rinnegan bearer threw every attack he could at Zabuza, to no avail. Zabuza destroyed the final clone with a kick before finally deciding enough was enough. Seeing Naruto brought his hands together to create more clones, the swordsman shot forward, punching Naruto in the stomach before delivering another harsh blow to his face, sending him to the ground. When he tried to get up, Zabuza brought his foot down on his back, pinning him to the ground. You done yet? Zabuza asked as he looked down at the genin, who struggled for a few moments before giving up. Zabuza moved his foot off of his back and Naruto slowly rose to his feet. See, kid. Your entire fighting style revolves around overwhelming your opponents with those clones. Without them, you've got nothing. You're not even throwing your punches or kicking properly. You've got a pretty good grasp of exploiting weaknesses, not that that's going to do you much good with your limited abilities. Those eyes of yours won't help you either if you don't know how to use them. From your lack of control, I'm guessing you can't even dispel genjutsu and you've got one technique outside the basics. I'll admit, your strategies are good, but you're not going to get anywhere relying on clones and that ridiculous stamina you've got. Naruto hung his head. But this means you're a blank slate. You're just a rookie, it's not surprising you've got nothing going for you yet. Everything you're lacking, you can learn as long as you actually put some effort into it and don't expect everything to just come to you. Even geniuses have to work at this. As for your taijutsu, all we've got to do is find the style that best suits you. Your strategies and your ability to learn such an advanced jutsu, despite how recently you became a ninja, shows you have potential that hasn't been exploited yet. Naruto's head rose as Zabuza continued until a smile spread across his face when he finished. So, kid. You ready to get started? Do you even have to ask? You're talking to the guy who's going to be Hokage someday. Naruto said. Zabuza gave a short laugh. That's so. Yep, so throw everything you've got at me. Naruto pumped his fist confidently. His confidence didn't waver, even as a sadistic smirk broke out under Zabuza's mask. The door to Naruto's apartment opened, revealing a beaten and bloody blonde who entered and closed and locked the door behind him. He then dragged his feet through his apartment, heading straight to his bed before falling face forward onto the mattress, not even bothering to change out of his bright orange tracksuit. After the fight and his lecture, Zabuza sparred with the blonde, pounding him into the ground with little mercy, analyzing the genin's strengths and weaknesses, taking note of every aspect of the blonde's fighting style and how he moved, attacked and dodged. By the end of it, Naruto had barely been standing. Thankful for his natural healing ability, Naruto's purple-ringed eyes closed and he soon fell asleep, aware that by the time he woke up, he'd be fully healed. Naruto once again stood before Zabuza in the clearing outside the third training ground after his team finished their water walking exercises and split into separate groups. The masked Jonin had lined up 2 logs near the edge of the tree line about 2 yards away from each other before the 3 genin had arrived. Zabuza folded his arms as he looked down at the genin. "Let's get started. Listen up kid, I don't like repeating myself." The blonde nodded. "Before we begin, the first thing we're going to have to do is unlearn everything you know right now." Naruto gave him a questioning and slightly shocked stare. "What do you mean, I have to unlearn everything? I spent years getting these moves down. You shouldn't have wasted your time. Like I said, you can't even throw a decent punch. You fight like a brawler, putting all of your weight into every single one of your attacks and hoping they'll hit something. This not only means that if you miss, you'll overextend yourself, but it will also leave you open to counterattacks. You also waste a lot of movement and you broadcast your attacks. The fighter with any experience would see your strikes coming from a mile away." As Zabuza spoke, Naruto's shoulders kept slumping more and more, like a several-ton boulder was falling on him with each remark Zabuza made about his taijutsu style, or lack thereof. "What this means is that we need to start from scratch," Zabuza continued, either not noticing or not caring about the blonde's increasing depression. It was likely the latter. "I'm going to teach you how to throw a basic punch and string them in combinations. You will then copy my movements, got it?" "Got it," Naruto mumbled lowly. "What was that?" asked Zabuza. "I couldn't hear you, did you say I need a good ass kicking Zabuza?" "Well okay, but don't say I didn't warn you." "I said I got it," Naruto shouted, paling at the threat. Zabuza smirked underneath his mask. "Oh, well you should have spoken up then. Just for that you're getting extra sparring tonight." Naruto groaned while Zabuza moved up to one of the training posts. "Now watch carefully Brad, because I'm only going to show you this once." Zabuza suddenly lashed out with his fist, punching the log with enough force to make it shake. It was fast enough that it was enough to leave a small dent in the log, but slow enough that Naruto could see it. "Notice then when I throw a punch, I always start from the waist. This is so that my punches have enough power to actually do some damage. You should also notice that when my fist is near my waist, my hand is running perpendicular to the ground, yet when I throw it out, the fist corkscrews and ends up running horizontally by the time it's fully hyperextended. That is how a basic punch is thrown, now hop to it Brad." Naruto stepped up to the unoccupied log and imitated Zabuza's motion, though his punch wasn't strong enough to budge the hunk of wood. "Good, now repeat with your other hand." The demon of the mist watched as Naruto did as told before turning to him, waiting for his next order. "Don't just stop, Dumbus. Keep it up until I tell you otherwise." Naruto growled slightly at the insult. "What was that?" Rather than answer, the blonde began throwing punches at the log. Zabuza watched Naruto continue this for a few minutes before stopping him and showing him a 4-hit kata comprised of 2 punches identical to the previous ones, with 2 kicks in between. The Jonin then stepped back and watched as his temporary student repeated these movements. Eventually, due to the monotony of the act and muscle memory, the boy put too much weight into one of his punches. Zabuza's eyes narrowed as he saw the blonde begin to fall back into his old way of fighting. "Stop." Naruto stopped mid-punch and turned to the swordsman with a raised brow. "What's wrong? You screwed up, that's what. You lost focus and let your moves get sloppy," the masked man stated before walking away. Naruto tilted his head and then his eyes widened when Zabuza returned, carrying 2 boulders, each about 3 times the size of the Rinnegan bearer's head. Zabuza walked up to the boy as though the stones were as light as feather before dropping them at the blonde's feet. "Pick those up and give me 20 laps around the clearing." "What?" Naruto yelled. "You heard me. Now get to it," Zabuza said before pulling out a kunai. "Or do you need some added incentive? It works so well with your water walking." Naruto's eyes widened, a trace of fear spreading across his face. "No, that's alright." Naruto spoke in a hurried tone as he shot forward so fast one out almost think he used a body flicker, quickly picked up the boulders, holding them over his shoulders, and began running around the clearing. "I'll do exactly as you said." Zabuza crossed his arms and watched. After 10 minutes, Naruto finally finished his laps. He dropped the boulders in front of Zabuza and crouched over, placing his hands on his knees as he breathed heavily. The Jonin allowed him to rest for a minute before jerking his head towards the log. "That's enough rest, back to work." Naruto glared at his sensei and grumbled as he stepped up to the log again and got back to practice. After a few minutes, Naruto's made another move wrong. Stop. You screwed up again. Start running. Naruto turned back to Zabuza, his mouth agape and his eyes wide, before picking up the boulders and making another set of laps around the clearing. Sakura stood before Haku in their own clearing. Like his master, he had decided to build Sakura's fighting style from the ground up. He had Sakura undergo a similar exercise to what Zabuza had Naruto do, although he was much more forgiving about it, simply correcting her when she made a mistake and allowing her brief breaks. Unlike Naruto, Sakura did know how to throw a decent punch. That's not to say she didn't have her own problems, beyond her physical abilities or lack thereof. Sakura stopped her kata and turned to her temporary teacher. Haku. She began, causing the dark-haired boy gave her a questioning look. Can I ask why you have me doing this? I mean, you told me my form was good and that the problem was my style. So why do you have me practicing these katas? Haku raised a brow before crossing his arms and closing his eyes as he began to explain. Well, though that's true, that's not your only problem. No offense Sakura, but you're lacking in strength, speed and stamina. And though your form is good, as Zabuza said you're not very skilled. There's also a large problem in your offensive strategy. You put all your strength into every attack, most likely in hopes of ending a battle quickly and pushing your enemy away. This doesn't mesh well with your lack of physical strength. You'll just tire yourself out without doing any real damage. He opened his eyes and looked at the pink-haired girl, who seemed a little dejected at what his assessment of her skills. But this can all be fixed in time. I taught you these katas to get you used to stringing attacks together. And I intend to teach you to attack the body's soft areas, such as the throat, nose, eyes, kidneys and the solar plexus. This will allow you to deal more damage and incapacitate your enemies quickly to compensate for your current lack of stamina. There are also a few exercises I have in mind to help with your physical abilities. Sakura smiled slightly. I see. Thank you. A thought then occurred to her and she gained a worried look. Wait, what kind of exercises do you have in mind? You're not going to make me wear weights or something, are you? Haku's eyes showed disapproval and shook his head. No. Well, that would help you grow stronger and faster. The constant use of the muscles in your arms and legs in such a manner would cause them to become bulky, making you stronger at the cost of flexibility. I have other exercises in mind for you that will build your strength and speed more naturally. We'll get started on those later. Also, if I'm not mistaken, you've been dieting, haven't you? The pink-haired girl paled slightly and nodded. I'm going to have to ask you to stop and to start eating a normal diet. Sakura looked as if he had just asked her to do the impossible. Boo, but if I do that, I'll lose my figure. She said, her tone fearful as she imagined herself becoming fat and becoming unattractive. Haku's eye twitched before he sighed. He was beginning to see why Zabuza was annoyed by the thought of training a fangirl as he called her. Sakura, your body will need energy and nutrients for your muscles to develop. But I've spent all my life striving to maintain my figure. Which is probably part of the reason you have this problem now, Haku thought with another sigh. You needn't worry, your body will use most of the calories as it develops, so it won't harm your figure if you continue training. Seeing her still unconvinced expression, he pressed besides, your body needs the energy to grow properly. Without it, your growth will be stunted and not just in muscle strength. That got Sakura's attention. Really? Yes. Not only does not eating properly slow the development of muscles, doing so while your body matures can also stunt your physical growth and prevent your body from developing properly during puberty. Meaning, for example, you could wind up with smaller breasts than you would have otherwise. He could see from the look on the girl's face that got to her. Anyway, I believe you've been practicing katas for long enough. Have you given any thought to what style you want to learn? How exactly do you wish to face an opponent? Sakura shook her head to clear her mind of the previous topic before her brow furrowed as she thought before answering. Well, Kakashi-sensei always said I have talent in Genjutsu. I guess I'd like to use that to throw off my opponent and then defeat them before they can recover. I could use that to help my teammates too. Haku nodded. Good. But in terms of taijutsu and physical combat, to be honest, your style seems like something I'd like to use. Sakura said and Haku raised an eyebrow. I've been reading those books you gave me and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested in the medical skills you talked about. Using senbon to target vital spots and pressure points sounds like a good way to fight. I'd also prefer to use speed over strength. I think I'd like to evade my opponent over trying to block their attacks if I could, and what you said earlier about targeting vulnerable areas sounds good if I get drawn into close combat. Haku nodded. Very well. I will teach you the basics of my style. We will work on increasing your speed and precision as I teach you all the body's weak points, and we'll work on your accuracy with senbon to form the basis of your own style. However, you should keep in mind it'll take a lot of work to gain this level of speed and accuracy. Sakura hesitated for a few moments as she thought of what she was committing herself to before nodding. After a pause, Haku sighed and closed his eyes. The girl may have been a bit more willing to train after Zabuza's blunt assessment of her abilities, but she wasn't driven to really put her best into it. Sakura, let me ask you another question. Why did you become a ninja? His eyes opened and his gazed into her questioning stare. Why do you fight and wish to become strong? Well, what do you mean? Exactly what I said. Haku replied before elaborating. You don't seem to be putting your all into this. Unlike your teammates, there seems to be nothing driving you. You're only putting as much effort into this lifestyle as your teacher demands of you. In doing so, you endanger the lives of your fellows. So I ask you, what was your motivation for becoming a kunoichi in the first place? After another pause he continued. In choosing to become a ninja, you've chosen a profession in which you will have to fight, kill, and risk your own life in order to survive. There are many other lines of work you could have chosen in which you would have been allowed to live peacefully. I myself do not like killing or inflicting harm. I became a ninja for 2 reasons. For the first, given my background and the bleak outlook of my life, I didn't have a choice. The second is loyalty and duty. When I had no future, no purpose, Zabuza was there. He saved me from a life on the streets and gave me a reason to live. For that reason, he is precious to me. To serve and protect him, I wish to become stronger. Sakura's eyes widened. Naruto wishes to become strong to fulfill his dreams and to protect his own precious people. Others who choose this life do so out of duty to their family, clan or village. Which they are more loyal to is up to the individual, but they all fight for the honor and well-being of what they've dedicated themselves to. Others fight because, like Naruto, there's something they wish to accomplish. Some fight for revenge. Though, hopefully, they don't allow themselves to be consumed by the hatred that drives them and may eventually find other things they care about. Their motivation is to gain the strength to strike down those who wronged them. Sakura's gaze fell to the ground as she considered Ice User's words. As she took in everything he was saying, a look of contemplation came over her face. Her brow furrowed when he spoke of revenge, remembering Sasuke's words when Kakashi asked about his dreams. I'm going to restore my clan. And destroy a certain someone. Others wish for power for selfish reasons. They care little, if at all, for the things others hold dear or even the lives of others and care only for their own advancement, always craving more power and recognition. Perhaps for selfish goals, perhaps simply for power's sake or out of a desire to be the strongest. Either way, they seek to grow strong for themselves. Haku's expression turned serious. What do you fight for, Sakura? Sakura muttered, still staring at the soil. For so long, she'd just been living life carefree. She thought only of positive things, like gaining Sasuke's affection. She knew the rules of shinobi conduct and what was expected of her as a kunoichi, but she hadn't really thought about it in so long. Similarly, she hadn't thought of the reason why she had chosen this life in so long it was buried deep within her mind. Soon, the memory of her original motivation came to her. My father. She finally answered. My father was a shinobi. He died when I was very young, too young to even remember him. She looked up at the androgynous teen. I became a ninja because I wanted him to be proud of me. Haku nodded. So, you chose this life to follow in your father's footsteps. That is a good enough reason, but it doesn't seem to really motivate you. Maybe because, as you said, you have no memories of him. It is hard to fight on behalf of someone you never knew. Personally, I believe that one can only awaken their true strength when they have someone or something important that they wish to protect. He let his words sink in. Think of what I've said and what you really wish to do or accomplish with what you learn. For now, let us begin, if you are ready. After a moment Sakura nodded. Follow my movements as best you can. The boy said before shifting into a combat stance, which she imitated. Okay, Sasuke. Kakashi began as he looked down at the last Uchiha in Konoha, who was sitting with his arm propped up on his knee, panting slightly. Unlike his teammates, there were no major flaws that needed to be corrected in the boy's taijutsu, and he was quite proficient in his clan's fighting style for his age. There was always room for improvement however, and he was sure what he was doing here would not only help with one weakness the boy had at the moment, it might also help deflate his ego a bit. Well, he was somewhat better than when they started, the young Sharingan wielder's arrogance was still an issue. Now that we've finished our warm-up, it's time we got started. Sasuke glared at his sensei as he got back on his feet. Since when had his idea of a warm-up been beating him into the ground? And what was worse, he had forbidden him from using the Sharingan. And Sasuke, remember, no Sharingan. Sasuke growled in anger. What's the point of this, Kakashi? Oh? You mean the reason you're not allowed to use your Sharingan? He questioned nonchalantly. I'm impressed. To be honest, I'd expected you to complain much sooner. Sasuke answered with an anger-filled stare. Fine, I'll answer your question. Better yet, how about I show you? Sasuke, I'm going to hit you in the center of your torso. Try to stop me, without your Sharingan. Sasuke's eyes widened. He quickly fell into a combat stance as Kakashi shot forward. Knowing where he was going to attack, Sasuke raised his guard, attempting to shield his torso. But it was to no avail. Faster than his eye could follow, Kakashi had closed the distance between them, his fist already past his guard and on a collision course with its target. Pain coursed through his system as his sensei's fist smashed into his solar plexus, the impact sending him flying through the air. The onyx-eyed boy landed on his back where he grabbed his stomach and chest, coughing as he tried to breathe. He gave his teacher a one-eyed glare while he tried to catch his breath. After a few moments, he began to stand. "Do you understand what I'm trying to accomplish?" the copy ninja asked. Seeing Sasuke's fierce look, he sighed. "I guess not. Okay, we're going to do this again. And this time, since I know you're just itching to do so, you may use your Sharingan. Now, try to stop me." Sasuke smirked. Within the blink of an eye, his coal-colored eyes bled crimson, 2 Tomo marks appeared in his right eye, while one appeared in his left as he activated his clan's Dojutsu. With the power of his clan Sharingan, blocking his sensei's attack would be easy. Or so he thought. He saw the attack coming a mile away, it was as if Kakashi's fist was moving in slow motion. He could see everything, he knew exactly where the attack would hit, when it would hit, and could even judge the timing it would take to properly deflect the attack. It was with a slow widening of his eyes that Sasuke realized he still couldn't block. He could only watch as his sensei's attack rapidly approached, his eyes seeing the movement a second before it occurred, but his body simply too slow to keep up. He saw the fist once more pass his guard, now too close to avoid or dodge. He got hit hard. He hadn't even had the time to brace himself before his teacher's fist was buried in his gut once more, launching him into the air. It was there that it really sunk in, that horrible feeling of seeing something coming, but being completely unable to avoid or stop it. He landed on his back, holding his stomach and coughing as he tried to catch his breath. Kakashi looked down at the coughing boy. "Maybe now you can understand." The silver-haired Jonin began, causing Sasuke to look up at him as he tried to breathe. "Your Sharingan didn't help you at all, did it? The Sharingan certainly is an impressive tool, but it's just that, and a tool, no matter how powerful, doesn't make a ninja truly great. Even though you knew where I was going to hit you, even though your Sharingan allowed you to predict my movements, you weren't able to avoid my attack. Your body simply wasn't able to keep up." He paused as he allowed his words to sink in and waited for Sasuke to sit up before continuing. "As you know, the Uchiha style relies on your ability to predict your opponent's moves and counter them, which is why you're not allowed to use your Dojutsu. We're training to improve your speed and reaction time, and using your eyes would hamper that. After all, if you see my attack coming from a mile away, then you would prepare for it rather than simply react." Realization dawned in the Genin's eyes at that, now understanding the reason he wasn't allowed to use his clan's famed eyes. "Now, answer me this, Sasuke. My attack just now, if you were able to respond quickly enough to deflect it without the Sharingan, what would you be able to do with it?" A smirk spread across Sasuke's face, and the Jonin nodded. "I see you understand. Good. Of course, we'll need to train your Sharingan too, but that will come later. Now, get back on your feet." The silver-haired man waited for his student to stand and hoped he took his words about his bloodline to heart. As the sun stood just above the horizon, Naruto laid on the ground before Zabuza. Zabuza looked up at the darkening sky for a moment before his gaze fell back to the blonde. "Alright, I'd say that's enough for today. I'd say we made some good progress here," Zabuza said. "That's good," Naruto said weakly. "Good night." His head then fell, hitting the ground as he went limp. "Wah hey." Zabuza stepped forward, eyeing the unconscious Genin. He nudged him with his foot twice, hoping for a response. When there was none, he sighed. He then kneeled down, picking the blonde up and swinging him over his shoulder. He then stood up and walked through the trees back to the main training ground. When he neared Kakashi, who was standing before an exhausted Sasuke, turned to him. "Ah, Zabuza. I see you pushed Naruto a bit hard." Zabuza snorted. "I see the stories I've heard about you left out that you have a talent for stating the obvious." Kakashi smiled at the former Miss Ninja. "They also tend to leave out my humble personality and glowing sense of humor." "Yeah, I'm sure they just forgot to mention those," Zabuza replied in a deadpan voice. "Now, you mind telling me where this brat lives?" The next day, Naruto continued to repeat the set of moves that Zabuza had shown him. He could at last throw punches and kicks that met Zabuza's standard, though he still had no real style. "Okay, brat, that's enough." Zabuza spoke up, surprising the Genin a bit. "It's about time you decided what kind of fighting style you want to learn." The boy's eyes gained an excited gleam, which was quickly taken away by the masked Jonin's next words. "And for that, I want you to head to the library." "What?" Naruto almost yelled. "Why do I have to go to that place?" "Because brat, it's the best way for you to see what's out there. There are countless fighting styles in existence, and I'm not a walking encyclopedia of combat styles. If you had more of a fighting style to begin with, we might have been able to work with it and develop a style for you, but that isn't the case. Do you even have any idea how you want to fight? Besides wanting to beat up the enemy with strong attacks. Naruto looked to the ground. Well, Zabuza crossed his arms. Exactly. Now get to it. Naruto took a step forward as if to challenge the man, desperate to avoid going to one of the places he considered the most boring on the planet. Aw, come on. He then pointed in the direction of the main section of the training ground where the two Sharingan wielders trained. Can't I just ask Kakashi? With his Sharingan, he's probably copied dozens of different styles. The former Miss Ninja raised a brow. That's a good point. He conceded. But I think this will prove the better option. Now go. And I won't teach you anything else until you come back with something. Naruto's eyes widened before he quickly agreed and bolted off as Zabuza watched. Once the blonde was out of sight and he was alone, the former missing nin made his way over to a nearby tree, pulled out a familiar orange book and leaned back against the trunk as he flipped open to the page he left off and began reading. He may not borderline worship the text like a certain silver-haired jonin, but he did enjoy it. As he began catching up, he considered what he was going to do with the rest of the day. The blonde wouldn't be back until at least tomorrow if he knew what was good for him. This would serve as a major part of his fighting style for the rest of his life. After making a brief stop at his apartment to get his backpack, Naruto found the village's library easily enough, though it had taken a while to find someone willing to give him directions. He stepped in through the building's double doors and his arms fell limp at his sides as his eyes scanned the massive room, looking over all the bookcases and walls covered in books and scrolls. Oh man, how am I ever going to find anything in all this? He asked himself as his eyes continued to wander. With a sigh, he decided he might as well get started. The blonde walked to the nearest bookcase, skimming over the titles in search of Taijutsu style. 10 minutes later, Naruto let out a slight growl, his fist trembling at his sides as he walked down an aisle. He had found nothing even close to what he was looking for, and he would have long since given up had it not been for Zabuza's threat. The Jinchuriki was about ready to pull his hair out as he reached the end of the rows and examined a wall of books, finding nothing on Taijutsu. I can't believe this. How hard could it be to find one subject in this place? The blonde said, not noticing a nearby door opening silently. He turned and took 3 steps before suddenly crashing and falling backwards, landing on his rear and hearing someone else do the same. A noise of shock, feminine in origin, reached his ears and he opened his eyes to see who he'd run into. Before him sat a girl who seemed to be a little older than he was. She was wearing a white lab coat with a red dress. Her eyes were hidden like his own, though instead of sunglasses she wore odd, swirl-tinted glasses. She had a forehead protector wrapped as a sash around her waist, showing the girl was a kunoichi. Littered on the floor were 3 scrolls and a box the girl had been carrying. Oh, sorry about that. Naruto started to get up. No need to apologize. It was my fault, I wasn't paying attention. He said, extending his hand for her. She took it and he pulled her up. I've been told that happens a lot. The girl chuckled slightly as she brushed her coat and dress off as Naruto gathered the things she'd dropped. Thanks. I'm Shiho. She said as he handed her the box and scrolls. The blonde gave her a wide smile. The name's Naruto Uzumaki. Good to meet you. The girl seemed slightly surprised but then nodded. She had heard bad things about the kid in front of her, but he didn't seem that bad at all. With a smile of her own, she spoke. Well, it's nice to meet you too, even if we had a bumpy start. What brings you here today? Are you looking for something? Naruto's grin became tinged with excitement as he realized that this girl could probably help him locate what he was looking for. Yeah, is there a section on Taijutsu styles around here? Shiho raised a brow. Of course. It's next to the weapon styles and physical conditioning segments. Do you want me to show you? Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Thanks a lot, I've been here forever. Shiho gave a giggle as she turned, leading him through the aisles until they reached the back wall. Whoa, Naruto said as his eyes roamed the wall before him, each shelf full of scrolls on various Taijutsu styles. Well, I'll leave you to it. Good luck finding what you're looking for, Shiho said as she walked away. Thanks for the help. Naruto called back to her before turning back to the wall. Taking the nearest scroll, he began reading. Half an hour later, he sat on the floor, reading an open scroll. Surprisingly enough, he found he actually enjoyed this. The scrolls had detailed illustrations of the awesome moves he'd eventually be able to do if he chose this style, and he found himself imagining performing these attacks and counters usually on Sasuke as he read on. After another half hour, he found there were 3 styles he was interested in. His favorite relied on misdirection. On using counters and feints to make openings and baiting an opponent into seeing a non-existent opening. Problem was, it was lacking in offense. That was when he remembered Zabuza's words and got the idea to take the best of these different styles to form the base of his own unique one. Rolling up a scroll with a smile, he began to walk out before a thought struck him from out of nowhere. He quickly ran off to where he met Shiho and searched. After a few moments, he grinned before making a cross-shaped hand sign. In a flash, 5 shadow clones appeared and scattered, looking all over for the blonde girl. As soon as one clone located her, it dispersed, followed by the others since the search was over. The blonde quickly made his way to her location. He found her waiting, having noticed the clone, and guessed that the real one wouldn't be far behind. Is there something else I can help you with? Yeah. Do you have anything on chakra control? Thanks again. Naruto called back, waving at the girl wearing the swirl-tinted glasses standing outside the library's door. He had found 3 scrolls he'd decided to check out, the Taijutsu scrolls, and 2 on advanced chakra control exercises he was sure would be useful later, all of which he kept in his backpack. He walked down the streets of Konoha, humming a tune. Despite his initial misgivings, his trip to the library had turned out well, and the whole affair had put him in a good mood. He decided he'd finish off the day with no less than a dozen bowls of Ichiraku ramen. The perfect way to end a good day or a bad one, or anyone really. He stopped in his tracks when he saw Haku and Sakura walking towards him, laughing over something he hadn't heard. There was a brief flash of fear that the pair were on a date before he walked up to them. Sakura, Haku. The pink-haired girl and the androgynous teen turned to him. Naruto. What are you doing out here? Sakura asked. Oh, I was just coming from the library and thought I'd head to Ichiraku's. Sakura gave him an incredulous look. The library? You? The one who couldn't even spell chakra properly? Since when did you grow a brain? That hurts, Sakura. Naruto hung his head down, only to look up as he heard her giggle. I'm just kidding. So, I guess all that reading Kakashi-sensei had your clones do is already starting to pay off, huh? So, what were you looking for? Well, Zabuza-sensei said I should look for a fighting style I was interested in, but I found some scrolls on chakra control I thought might help me down the road. Haku nodded approvingly. I'm glad to see you're taking initiative. But enough about me, what are you two doing out here? Don't tell me you're on a date, Sakura. How could you do that to us? Sakura glared at him slightly. Don't be stupid, it's nothing like that. We're just friends. The blonde perked up. Oh, then how about joining me to Ichiraku's, huh? And then how about we do something? Just the 2 of us? Not a chance, Naruto. Sakura said flatly. Oh, come on. It could be fun and I'll pay for everything. What have you got to lose? How about my dignity? Sakura asked, getting annoyed. Naruto, get it through your head that I'm not going to date you. Ever. Not if you were the last male in the village. She then sighed and placed a hand on her face, not paying attention to the blonde's hurt expression. I was having a good time, and you've ruined it, as usual. Just go, okay? Haku looked shocked at the pink-haired girl as Naruto's face fell and he walked off dejectedly. Sorry. Haku's gaze went back and forth between his temporary charge and the retreating figure of the Jinchuriki before turning to Sakura with a frown. Sakura, have you always treated him that way? Huh? Sakura turned to him before she shrugged. Yeah, why? Why would you treat him like that? Did you see how much you hurt him? Sakura made a surprised sound before saying. Well, he's annoying. He's always gotten on my last nerves with almost everything he does. He's loud and obnoxious, and on top of that he's got this crush on me and he never leaves me alone about it. And that's reason enough to treat your teammate in such a manner? The ice user asked and Sakura seemed to consider his words. The teen sighed after a moment. Sakura, have you noticed how everyone looks at him? How much hatred he has directed at him by the people of this village? Sakura blinked. Well, recently yeah. But it's probably something he brought upon himself with all his stupid pranks. She said, though she secretly enjoyed the pranks and her inner self voiced that. Sakura, do you honestly think he could have pranked everyone in Konoha to the point that they'd all glare at him like that? Haku asked, causing the pink-haired Kunoichi to think about it for a moment. Sakura, do you remember what I told you about why he wants to get stronger? He would go to any lengths to protect those precious to him, and I'm sure you're among those people. Please ask yourself, are you being a good teammate, a good friend, to him? He said before heading off after the blonde, leaving Sakura standing in the middle of the street, lost in thought. Naruto sat at the counter of the ramen shop that was almost a second home to him, staring at the counter with a depressed expression on his face. Well, at least he had ramen to cheer him up. Gucci walked over to his place, carrying his order. Orders up. Hey, what's the matter? You look like a lost puppy. Naruto sighed. It's nothing. The old man saw that he didn't want to talk about it and nodded. Well, here's your order, first bowls on the house. Thanks. Naruto replied before he began slurping down the food. He stopped when he sensed someone sit down beside him and looked up to find Haku. Hey. I thought I'd join you. The ice user said. Ah, hey there. Haku, right. Tucci said, getting a nod in response. What can I get you? 1 bowl of shrimp ramen, please. He said before turning back to the blonde. After giving the blonde a few moments, he asked. Do you want to talk about what just happened? Naruto put on a fake smile. Nah, it's fine. She's usually like that when I push her too far. I'll be fine and I'll get through to her someday. I know it. Haku sighed. Naruto, I understand that you like her, but you may want to tone it down a bit. Naruto turned to him. She feels like you're pestering her. It's part of the reason she treats you so poorly. Naruto's gaze fell back to his food, stirring the noodles in his bowl as he thought about what the ice user was saying. Actually, it might help if you learn a bit about manners and tact in general. I could help you with that if you want. Naruto raised a brow. Huh? Why do I need to learn that? It's not going to help me be a better ninja. Perhaps not, but it may help you become a good leader. Seeing Naruto's questioning gaze, he elaborated. I've noticed that you don't treat most people with much esteem. While ignoring formalities and social standing is fine in some situations, such as with friends or people who don't care about such things, there are cases where showing the proper respect is necessary, and from what I've seen, you wouldn't bother with it even in those cases, and aspects of your behavior, mainly your manners and tendency to announce your presence and show off, are not only trying but in the latter cases unbecoming of a ninja. I don't know, it might make you less annoying to Sakura. And it could only help you in the future. You'll find some people are not amused by dismissing formality and etiquette. Your dream is to become Hokage, right? Naruto nodded. As Hokage, you'll have to meet with the daimyo of this country and foreign leaders, including other Kage. While some won't care or possibly even find your lack of social graces refreshing, others will be offended. You could even potentially cause negotiations for an alliance to break down or start a war. Naruto blinked. Though he didn't really get it, he had seen how he could get on some people's nerves, though the feeling was generally mutual. The image of him, older and wearing the Hokage robes he desired so much, speaking to a foreign Kage, annoying him as he had Sakura and several others, and causing a breakdown of negotiations. He then thought of how the people of the village would claim he was a poor leader because of it, or the worse alternative, a war breaking out, simply because he offended the other leader. With a jerk and a shake of his head as if to rid the thoughts from his mind, he quickly turned to Haku. Could something like that really happen just because of the way I act? Seeing Haku nod, he cringed slightly. Well, if it helps me be a better Hokage, I guess I have no choice, though I'm not going to make any promises. Besides, I've got nothing to lose. Haku smiled. That's all I ask. And it's not like you'll have to act differently all the time. You just need to learn when the situation calls for it. And speaking of manners and tact, AM commented as she came up to them, placing her elbows on the counter, chin on the butt of her hands, as she leaned against it. Her eyes flickered over to Haku briefly, blushed, then looked back at Naruto. We should probably start with your eating habits. They're absolutely atrocious. Naruto blinked. Haku nodded in concurrence with the ramen waitress's words. I agree, I've seen you eat, especially ramen. Your eating habits are so bad that I've seen a few people get sick just watching you. He looked over at AM and smiled. Thank you for pointing that out, AM. AM blushed. And no problem. But now? I believe we should get started as soon as possible. Haku clapped his hands. Every day after your training with Zabuza, you will come here and AM, and I will begin imparting manners and good eating habits to you. Right. AM nodded her head effusively. Naruto looked at the two with wide pleading eyes. But do not worry, Naruto. This will not interfere with your training in any way. And it will definitely help you with women in the long run. AM tossed her favorite customer a wink. No girl likes a slob, after all. But AM is quite right. If you want to impress a woman, then you need to have good table manners. Naruto looked at the two of them in despair. Are either of you listening to me? What if Naruto Sage of 6 Paths Mode Chunin exams? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.